Okay, we're ready to start. Welcome to the regular business meeting of the Commission on Police Practices for September 4th, 2024. We have a quorum, and I just want to let you know our audio for today. Try to speak loud, and the microphones above you are what we're going to use. So, and then if we have a speaker, obviously they'll use the main mic. I just want to start the meeting by expressing our condolences to all those affected by the tragedy on August 26th, the collision that killed Officer Austin McIntyre. And we want to express our condolences to his family, friends, and the San Diego Police Department, and also injured Officer Zach Martinez. And we're so glad that he miraculously was released from the hospital yesterday. He has a long road to recovery, but we wish him the best. And we also want to send our condolences to 16-year-old Edgar Giovanni Oviedo's family. He passed away in the tragic accident. So we just want to send our condolences, know that it was a tragedy, and go from there. And on that note, Ms. Condi, will you please do roll call?
Yes. Okay. Chair Gloria Tran.
Here.
First Vice Chair Dennis Brown.
Here.
Thank you. Second Vice Chair Doug Case.
Here.
Commissioner Aguilar is not here yet. Commissioner Armentrout.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Benitez.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Byer.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Kansen is not here yet. Commissioner Chatsky.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Diaz is running late. Commissioner Dockstader?
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Flores? Not here yet. Commissioner Griffin Jones is not here yet. Commissioner Dwayne Harvey, he is absent or excused.
He's excused.
Excused, sorry. Commissioner Hilbert?
He's excused as well.
Okay. And Commissioner Honore is also excused. Okay. Commissioner Justice?
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Lawton is not here yet. Commissioner Mendoza?
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Molnat?
Yes, Mom.
Thank you. It's okay. Commissioner Ortega? Thank you. Commissioner Robinson is running late. Thank you. Commissioner Rocha Vasquez? Thank you. And Commissioner Rodriguez?
Here.
Thank you. That concludes roll call.
Thank you, Ms. Condi. Now looking at the approval of the meeting minutes from August 21st. Any recommended amendments? Okay. All right, thank you, Commissioner Justice. Move for approval. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous. Thank you. And now we have non-agenda public comment.
Chair, we have speak in person, not online as of yet. Those 7 requests. I'm going to call you in order this right now. I'm going to call it.
Yeah.
I'm going to call 7 requests in order so you know what order you're going in, and then each of you will have 3 minutes. That will be strictly held to 3 minutes per. So the order will be Daryl Cotton, Joe Hurtado, Amy Sherlock, and then Carl Jackson and Candace Booth will be seating time with Sherlock, June Fila, and M. Wolf Siegel. That will be your order. And so, Mr. Cotton, your 3 minutes starts.
Thank you. My name is Daryl Cotton, and I've been a resident, commercial property owner in San Diego since 1979.
Sorry.
They
Sorry, we're going to have you speak into the microphone.
Getting my.
they don't get it, okay? So I get my time there?
Yeah.
We'll give you time back.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Daryl Cotton, and I have been a resident and commercial property owner in San Diego since 1979. And here today is the big element to bring to this commission's attention the public safety threat that exists in our community from the adult use cannabis industry as a direct result of the city not enforcing state and city ordinances where it requires background checks of those with an ownership interest in these businesses. The San Diego Police Department, despite having been made aware of the fact ownership interests are not being provided to them, have refused to publicly respond to our numerous queries to the tenant owner of one of these businesses to be properly vetted if their ownership interest is not provided. The answer is clearly no. But what we're requesting is that written verification from SCPP that unless that ownership information has been provided to them, they have no way to know if they're mandatory background checks, and the owners cannot engage in commercial cannabis activity. To date, no one at SCPP has been willing to provide us with that verification. We seek the Commission's assistance in seeing that state of the issue. These are all cash businesses. They don't accept credit cards, and they bank well account to them because they sell legal product, cannabis. And average monthly gross sales of one of these businesses would be $1 million. That's a lot of money, especially for a cash business. The law requires and you need to know who has ownership interest and that they have passed the background checks before you bring granted these interests. The Michigan state law requires that these interests known are very long established. What I will be doing is handing out this document, which is right from one of our speakers' websites, and that contains Sherlock. She follows it. All of these presented today, including the video of the school hearing, will be found at her Justice Range website. Since December 2023, there have been 21 San Diego grand jury complaints filed by multiple parties, including attorneys, who have found that an underlying issue in all of these grand jury complaints that disclosure laws are being violated and police seem powerless or even unwilling to do anything about it. These complaints are being investigated as they are held over to July 2024 grand jury term. In the case of Jesus and Andreas Carpena, civil complaints were submitted that describe their activities and illegally obtaining PPP and SBA loans of the capital for dispensary owners who misrepresented their type of businesses to the federal government. This is called a strongman practice. It's illegal form of influence peddling. What is happening in Chula Vista is happening here at about 50x rate. There are two long-established ordinances, which you'll see on the website, and we'll be addressed later. But when I began the statement, I referred myself as a victim. And please read my statement regarding an armed robbery that took place at our 151 Farm business, in which the San Diego Police Department had a getaway driver and handcuffed and let him go at the scene without ever filing charges. Although no one was killed in that robbery, the same cannot be said for what happened in the Sherlocks, other than occupied by Sherlock. I can be reached by phone at 619-954-4447 or on email at 151@gmail. I am happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cotton. Next, we will call Joe Portales. Your 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Joe Portales. I'm here with the anniversary of the people who are all talking about something that's very simple. Although it's very less than very different. We've had been talking about information at a high level, it's very simple. There are a group of people who made a lot of money in San Diego selling cannabis legally. And you used to be able to operate a dispensary and call it a nonprofit, but really operate for profit. And this was a big young San Diego goal. These people made millions of dollars. A lot of it got caught. They got changed by the city of San Diego today that operated for offering legal dispensaries, didn't have the proper permit, and they would pay fines. The amount of money that they made more than enough covered the fines that they had to pay the city. This was back when California legalized cannabis. In 2016, the state of California legalized for-profit sale of cannabis. This changed the game. All of a sudden, you could sell cannabis and make a lot of money. The problem was the state of California required you to apply on to get some controlled substance. California and the city of San Diego got to get licensed and go through background. And one of the things that they required was that if you got caught selling drugs illegally 3 years before you applied, you don't qualify for a license. That makes sense, right? Like, hey, you're a drug dealer. You don't get a license to sell cannabis in our stores, especially in San Diego. So what happened is these people, in the group of them in San Diego, they're wealthy, they're powerful, they're politically connected, they're lobbyists, they have great attorneys. They started using proxies to acquire the licenses to get these dispensaries. So, hey, if you got caught selling legal dispensaries, you still want to own a legal dispensary, so you put it in your friend's name. In our case, we have someone named Larry Urosky who applied for a license to sell cannabis in the name of his secretary, Rebecca Berry. That's illegal. You don't got to have a legal knowledge or background to understand. If you want to get a license in the city of San Diego to sell cannabis, you get a lot of money, I mean millions and tens of millions of dollars, you got to qualify. But the people who want those licenses, historically have been drug dealers, have been caught, a lot of them qualify. So they hired political lobbyists and attorneys like John Austin, who, as of this date, is a very famous, prestigious attorney who the city hires and treats well and ostensibly respects because she's famous. But what they've done, honestly, basically, we've gone to the police and reported and said, hey, you cannot have somebody selling drugs in someone else's name. And the police say, you are right. You're right. That's illegal and criminal. But we're not going to do anything about it because it's too big. What you're talking about, a large group of people selling cannabis and paying off people, it's too big for a handle. They told us to go to the FBI. I went to the FBI. They said, you're right, but they're doing it illegal. Go back to the police. I went back to the police. They did nothing.
That's no fault in Amy Sherlock. Now, Amy Sherlock has two people, Carl Jackson and it was season time. Is that correct?
That's correct. Hi, my name is Amy Sherlock. I flew in from Dallas today to attend this meeting. I'm the widow of Michael Biker Sherlock. Biker was a husband, father, business owner, and professional athlete. He was an X Games and Gravity Games champion in downhill skateboarding and street league, and a hometown hero here in San Diego. In 2015, Biker was awarded 2 cannabis licenses and organized multiple businesses with his partners. I was blindsided and devastated when he passed away December 2nd, 2015. SDPD and medical examiner told me he died by suicide. I believe that for 4 years. Through litigation research, I have learned that Biker's interests were transferred to his partners through a series of forgeries. Biker's LLCs were dissolved by forgery and submitted to the California Secretary of State weeks after he died. The partners organized new LLCs went on to be in business without my knowledge through the use of these forged documents. In fall of 2022, I hired a private investigator and an independent medical examiner to investigate and look into the police report, autopsy, and crime scene photos. Both were reports that SCPD and ME did a subpar investigation and pointed out multiple points of evidence determining that Biker's cause of death should be changed from suicide to, at a minimum, undetermined. This was all done collectively in a report called Armorous. December 2nd, 2022, Daryl Cotton, Joe Mercado, and I met with Sergeant Joel Tunning of the cold case unit. We described how Biker's partners had the motive to eliminate him. He agreed with us and agreed to look over the information. 5 months later, Sergeant Tunning called me back for multiple emails, and he said, quote, there is a ton of motive behind Biker's death, that there was no real physical evidence to support the investigation, and he said he would not open one. Determined to get more justice, to get justice provider, I hired Scott Roeder to do another analysis and create a video. His analysis came back with Biker's death was 100% inconsistent with self-inflicted gunshot wound. In February of 2024, Biker's partner, Dwayne Alexander, came forward with information that my signature was forged on a conflict of interest waiver. With the assistance of an attorney, they dissolved his businesses without my knowledge and transferred everything to their partners. On March 1st, I made my first call to SCPD, filed a police report at the forgery and fraud investigated. In the 187 days of that phone call, it's been the most profoundly frustrating, intellectually and insulting job I've ever had. I have made 78 phone calls with San Diego PD, sheriffs, and CPP, and I made 20 with my local PD. I have gotten nowhere. I've left 6 detailed messages with the Financial Crimes Unit on March 1st and March through May of 2024. I never received one single message. On June 6th, I filed a formal complaint with Internal Affairs. Getting nothing in return, I filed a complaint with you guys, CPP, on July 1st. Receiving no active assistance and having continually to follow up on my complaint. I've spoken to an email with Ms. McFarland multiple times, but she's either confused, unwilling, or unable to open an investigation for me or assist in getting my case file. McFarland provided the phone number for Financial Crimes Unit, where in my complaint I stated I already left them 6 messages over the last 4 months. McFarland further insulted my intelligence by implying that I'm dumb enough to be calling the wrong number, and somehow the voicemail identifying as financial crimes really wasn't. Since filing my complaint, there's been a web of confusion, reassignment, delay, and zero communication. My case has been reassigned at least 3 times to Nielsen, Lopez, and Pepita. Officer
Boris Martinez has told me that SCPD doesn't have email. Doesn't have email. And I needed to send my report by mail. When I got this ridiculous and untrue statement, I asked him to call the department and coordinate the email. He said that SCPD does not have an internal phone system that allows them to talk between departments. The phone number that another detective gave me actually went to somebody else's voicemail, and it has been literally a cluster of who did it, where to go, and nobody really knows. Since my complaint, I've not been given a case number, assigned a category, been given a CPP investigator, or talked to an internal affairs investigator. My police report that SCPD and Ms. McFarland have managed not to file or get investigated for another 65 days, still has not been assigned to a financial crimes detective. Still, to all appearances, SCPD has intentionally prevented an investigation into a crime against me, and that crime is connected to the murder of my husband. The why, how, and who involved is within this commission's authority and responsibility to investigate. We're looking for justice here, and we're hoping that you guys can help us. The obvious path to justice is a special task force at Category 1 to investigate the financial crimes against my family by her death and to demand that our laws are enforced. Cannabis industry ownership, as required by law, must be accurately and fully disclosed for public safety. To that end, we request written verification from SCPD that unless ownership information has been provided to them, there is no way that SCPD doing that legally required a background check. Thus, the owner cannot engage in commercial cannabis activity. To date, no one in SCPD is willing to provide us with that information. We seek this commission's assistance. Please help me and my family. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to call two more speakers, and then I will respond just briefly to your comments reference to CPP activities that pertains to this. Okay, right. We'll do that as you can.
And good afternoon. My name is Michael Wolf. I have been a cannabis political activist and anti-prohibitionist since I was 15, so for about 53 years. What has happened is you guys have a responsibility to guard the guardians, to make sure that what's done in enforcing law is done lawfully, fairly, and equally. What's being presented is here are experts that have let the police department know we do not see. These aren't people off the street. These are people who make their living doing medical exams, examining the evidence in a crime scene. And they tell an officer this through this report, there is definitely physical evidence. This officer appears to be willfully negligent. The only reason a sworn officer whose duty is to uphold the Constitution, uphold the law, would not do that have to, I'm sorry to say, be corruption. There is enough other evidence in the reports that have been attached to what you commissioners are being presented. Please read them. This is an incredibly complex case that's been made incredibly easy because of the way that the evidence has been organized. Take a look at it. Please do your duties. Make the police behave lawfully. Make the police enforce the law. How is it a driver from a robbery is in the back of a car, come, and yet somehow there's not even a police report to the effect that this man has been arrested? This isn't an accident. This isn't, just someone spacing out. This is deliberate malfeasance, and it's on you. You have that responsibility. You have chosen. I'm sure no one came around and drafted you to be commissioners. You decided out of your desire to see law enforced properly to become commissioners. I'm asking you, for the sake of everyone in this city, that you do fulfill that duty. They're not asking us, they're asking you to please have the police department verify that if they're not given a name, they can't verify whether or not the person who has that name is legally allowed to have a license. and state law requires it. It's not a vague thing. It's not a provisional law. It's mandatory law, using the word shall and elsewhere using the word must. Not, well, if you get around to it. Please do your jobs. Make the police do their thing.
And we finally will call you. You actually speak. Oh, do I take 1 minute? Because it was Candace and you and some other person. We need to keep 1 minute. Stevie, you're not down. Go to Stevie, get it down. I have 30 seconds. We'll give you a minute. Okay.
Again, just to circle back, the Justice 480 website has a litigation section, and there's been a massive amount of litigation associated with this, but it all boils down to the same thing, even all 21 grand jury components. If these people that apply for these licenses, and it's a hugely profitable business, and it's all cash, do not disclose themselves, there's absolutely no way Sandy will keep doing their job. So when that brought to their attention, we said, listen, it's your position that you can vet somebody that's not listed as an applicant, they won't respond. If we just could get that response, that verification, that unless you are, and this is by city ordinance and state law, a required mandatory disclosure, undisclosed, SBPD cannot do their job. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll wait for me to grab. We'll wait for the mic to be grabbed.
That's it. Okay, first off, my condolences, absolute condolences on the loss of your husband. And so that's the most important, first off. Secondly, what I'd like to say is in reference to Mr. Farland. I've been here 2 months as the executive director. And during that time, Mr. Farland was our one person for compliance. In my time here, I see nothing but, this is the first I've heard the contract, but I have seen it provided my daily practice and making sure that she is helping the families, helping the plans the best she possibly can. Here's the problem, and this is one of the issues that we are facing right now. She's stuck in the middle, quite frankly, because of what we have, where we are right now in the setup with the CPP. We can review the cases that the police department has done, and we can opine whether we believe them or not. Independent investigations we cannot do at this point. We have to go the whole meet and confer process with the union. All right, that's going to take some time, maybe a couple of years. To that point, what I'm finding is our folks are doing the very best they can under trying circumstances to get families pointing in the right direction and to get answers from the police department who are doing the investigation. So that's probably what you're experiencing. So what I need, you and I will talk later, but what I know, and I'm not, like I said, I understand that, but I do feel the need to stand up for my folks, right? Of course. Okay, and I'm going to do that all the time. Yep. However, I know you have some documents. You're going to leave the 4A. Where is the 4A going?
Back there.
Be somewhere.
In the back.
He's going to take the documents from you. We're going to make sure they get with our minutes, and we're going to move on, and then I'll be back in touch with you. But I want to make sure I clear the record. All right. Okay. And we have one more.
At this point, we'll call Darwin Fishman.
Okay, let's see. Darwin, you'll be able to speak.
Good evening. Thank you. Darwin Fishman, Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego, she, him, his. And I just want to say just real quickly that thank CPP for your pretext town hall. I want to thank you guys again for that. Looking forward to the follow-up and the policy recommendations that come out of CPP, and then the reaction response from San Diego Police Department. I very much appreciate that. And given my own experience with CPP, I'm hoping that with the that'll be much different than what I had with CRB with the policy recommendations. So I'm looking forward to continuing to work with all of you and supporting you with that. I'm glad you're staffing up. I'm glad Aaron's on board. I'm looking forward to also your policy meetings, hopefully working out that there'll be a public part to that and we can get input. hear about how you develop your recommendations, and have a dialogue, conversation with the community as you develop those policy recommendations. And then also having going to CLERB meetings, I hope you also utilize elected officials, that you're also in conversations with things like the city council members and the mayor about your recommendations, as well as about your work in general. And that it's not just, of course, your staff that's doing it, but also you guys as board members that are involved with that. And then last, I just also say that I'm getting from community members, of course, they're concerned about CPP and CLERB both now have white males with law enforcement backgrounds that are leading them. Folks are going to be looking at this very critically to see what that actually means. Can they bring complaints to these places? What will be done? CLERB is going to be a real beast, as all of you know, with having an active FBI agent taking over there as their executive officer, and making sure, again, that people feel comfortable and confident in the process, and that if they file complaints, that they will be taken seriously, and that just because of who the executive officer is does not make up who the organization is, what they're capable of, and what they are doing on the ground. And I will be part of that process as community members still come to me, come to our organization about complaints, about issues they're encountering with law enforcement. So again, looking forward to working with all of you as we continue to deal with these challenges, especially the things that were highlighted by community members at the Pretext Town Hall, and hopefully there'll be more opportunities like that. I know you have the protest town hall, law enforcement, how they deal with demos, and that's a next great step. So thank you for this work, and again, looking forward to working with all of you guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Fishman. We have no other requests of being in person or online.
Thank you. We'll move forward now with our presentation on the process of decision-making and case review. I would like to turn it over to our ad hoc training committee co-chair, Malma, to introduce our speaker.
Okay, so it is my honor to be able to introduce Sharon Fairley. During the early days of the commission, I was eager to learn about best practices in law enforcement oversight. And I was referred to Sharon as a good resource. And let me tell you what a resource she is. Not only is she a lawyer, in fact, she's held positions as a federal prosecutor and assistant attorney general. This is all in Illinois. She was the first inspector general and general counsel for the city of Chicago. But really the experience she has directly relevant to our work is back in 2015, and dash cam was finally released a year after Laquan McDonald was fatally shot by a Chicago police officer. Protests followed, criticizing the police for lack of transparency, and a consent decree resulted after all of this that was to oversee what was going on with the law enforcement there. And it was in this environment that Sharon became the chief administrator of the Independent Police Review Authority. And that's the agency that was responsible at the time for police misconduct investigations. And she led the overhaul into what's now called the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, or COPA. So while the experience in Chicago is different than ours, the call for transparency and reform is definitely similar here. Sharon has been generous with her time. We exchanged numerous emails, and she even volunteered to meet via Zoom. So I really appreciated that. And during these interactions, we talked about today's topic, the decision-making in our work. And we took that topic on our training academy that was submitted to the full commission about case review, which was approved, I believe, in the spring. So we're really lucky that Sharon was in Southern California and can squeeze us in And I'm really looking forward to the presentation. So Sharon, please take it away.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Actually, it's my pleasure and honor to be with you here today. This community, you all are incredibly impressive in that you have this long history. Your community has this long history of community-driven approaches to police oversight, right? And it goes back decades. And so you guys have been among the pioneers in civilian oversight across the country. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for what you do, and so it's my honor actually to be here among you. Civilian oversight is really going through an unprecedented time right now. I don't know how much you sense that, but there's clearly been tremendous growth in civilian oversight, particularly in the last 40 years following the killing of George Floyd. And so as more communities turn to civilian oversight as an important and strategic police reform initiative, we're seeing greater and greater pushback by law enforcement and communities. And so civilian oversight, on the one side, it's growing and it's developing. There's a lot of really interesting experimentation going on. But there's also a lot of challenges that are being faced because law enforcement, as always, as I'm sure you all know, push back against the development of anything that sort of challenges their autonomy, if you will. And so that's the environment that we're in right now. For example, we have state legislation in the United States that's limiting the scope of civilian oversight, Florida, Tennessee, Arizona, and so we have a lot of work to be done to defend the term and to ensure that civilian oversight is available to communities who seek it, as your community has done through Miranda. Go ahead and jump through the slide. So what I'm going to try to cover today is talk a little bit about the investigative process, because that's really important in evaluating cases, how the evidence is gathered and how it comes to you. We'll talk about the decision-making around case outcomes and what goes into those kinds of decisions. Some of the considerations that you guys have to weigh, talking about the alleged conduct, the applicable rules, the available evidence. We're going to talk a lot about how we assess evidence and how we weigh evidence, different kinds of evidence, with a couple of case studies. Hopefully we'll be able to have two case studies that we have the potential to talk about this afternoon. Hopefully we can get to both. I'll try to move through quickly as we can. At the end of the day, we're talking about making findings of fact and then applying policy based on those factual findings. So there's two pieces to the decision making to get to the outcomes that you need to find. And so we'll talk about how we go about those in terms of the next slide. Okay. Accountability, right? So we're all here because we want to be part of a system that supports accountability for our law enforcement partners. Why? Why is accountability important? So what you don't know about it, what you may not know, you're not a law professor. What does that mean? Law is about the Socratic method, meaning I will call on you. So I'm going to ask a lot of questions. Why is accountability important? Yes.
Because in the absence of accountability, entities like law enforcement agencies that have a lot of authority and discretion and power, if they have no one to answer to, then that power goes on.
Right. So accountability is essential, right? It's essential to the trust in law enforcement, which is also essential to public. We know that when communities don't trust the system, that they are less likely to engage with law enforcement, they're less likely to call law enforcement, they're less likely to cooperate with investigations. And that makes the environment less safe for all of us, including law enforcement. So accountability is really important. And of course, civilian oversight is one of the mechanisms that can contribute to accountability. The civilian oversight entities typically exist within an accountability infrastructure for a given jurisdiction. And civilian oversight, when you think about it, it really goes back to the core idea of democracy, in that we as citizens want to have a say. Policing powers are amongst the most serious powers we bestow on our government to execute on our behalf. Right? The right to take liberty, the right to take life. And so we as a community want to have a say in how those powers are executed. And so the work that you do, this is an important, you are part of the democratic process for your community, and that's really important. If you could go to the next slide. And you can go ahead and build this. Okay, so there are three legal mechanisms through which police officers can be held accountable. You're probably familiar with this, right? There's a criminal justice system, right, where we have an officer that is charged with a crime for having committed this crime. There is the civil system where someone gets sued, where the officers are being held liable, civilly liable for committing this crime. And then we have the administrative system, where the officer is held accountable for breaking rules within the police department. Now, each of these systems is different and has different strengths and weaknesses because it varies in terms of who investigates, who is the decision maker, what the standard of proof is, right? We'll talk about that in a second. And so the challenge we face is that we know that the criminal justice system is not a terribly robust tool for holding officers accountable. Why is that? Anybody?
The burden for
Right. So the burden of proof is what? Beyond reasonable doubt, right? Really, really high standard when it comes to the burden of proof. And sometimes when you have a case where you don't have both sides available to tell the story, it may be hard to meet that burden of proof, right? And then of course you have the challenge of you have prosecutors that are sometimes reluctant to charge police officers because they have a relationship, building cases with them day in, day out. And then also, you have to be honest, and also grand juries are sometimes reluctant to indict officers, and pettit juries are reluctant to convict police officers. So what that adds up to is the criminal justice system is really not the primary means for holding police officers accountable. The civil justice system, meaning when a victim of police misconduct files a lawsuit, not also a terribly robust system for holding officers accountable. Why is that, Nathan? Qualified immunity, right? Qualified immunity limits the circumstances in which an officer can be held accountable for misconduct. So what that means is it's the third system, the administrative system, that really is the primary mechanism that we have to rely on for holding police officers accountable. The other reason why the administrative system for accountability is so important is because it's the administrative system and only the administrative system in which the police officers are evaluated based on policies, right, which create a higher standard of care relative to the legal criteria established in either the criminal system or the civil system. So the civil system, the standard of care is going to be based on the constitutional standard. Surprisingly low, right? The Supreme Court thinks it's perfectly fine to, for example, shoot at or into a meeting. Right? And then, of course, on the criminal side, of the criminal justice system, the standard is based on state law. And so sometimes state law is not going to be as high a standard of care as a police department policy. Right? Police department policies are based on best practices, and then also, we hope, that they reflect community input. Right? So that they reflect community values. And so that's why it's important that the administrative system for holding officers is robust, because again, it's going to be judging officers based on this higher standard. Okay. Jay, you can go through two slides. Okay. And then you can go ahead and put it one more time. Okay. So I've written about the key success factors for civilian oversight. And what I want to point out to you today is the one that's worth looking at. And that's the idea of neutrality and professionalism. And that's one of the reasons why we're having this conversation today. For a civilian oversight entity to be successful, it must be impartial. And the decisions that come out must be impartial. The decisions must be based on the evidence that's presented and evaluated in a fair and equitable manner. When that doesn't happen, it can be a problem. So when I took over the agency in Chicago, it was by and large, the reputation was that it was very law enforcement friendly. And then part of that was just because systemically, the way the agency operated, it created this bias towards law enforcement, right? But it's also problematic to go the other way, right? If law enforcement doesn't feel that they're going to be in a fair shape in the system, then that can be equally problematic for an agency, and this can cause a lot of problems. Okay, so it's really important that the decision-making process that is undertaken is fair, neutral, and based on okay, so we all know about the potential outcomes, right? So what we have to do in a case, right, is look at the evidence, and then at the end of it, we've got to come up with this decision, right? Whether it's sustained, not sustained, exonerated, or unfounded, right? And that the process of getting there, we're going to be paying attention to both the allegation and what happened in the incident, and then we're also going to be paying attention to what the applicable rule set, because those are what are going to guide us in this decision-making process. Now, there's also, if you can go to the next slide, those are the outcomes that, the internal affairs will have determined, right? And so your group will then look at those outcomes and have to decide whether or not you agree with those outcomes, right? And but you have to understand what each of those outcomes means, in order to determine whether or not you support those findings. Okay, so next slide, please. The other thing I wanted to point out, which I think is really important, and it's in your own bylaws, right? This idea of fairness and equity in the decision making, because you, by your own rules, right, have said that you need to conduct investigations and evaluations that are open and with an open and questioning mind, integrity, objectivity, and fairness, right? Rigorously testing the accuracy and reliability of information from all sources, right? So one of the things I talk about is the idea you might have a situation where you have a narrative that the officer brings to fight. This is the officer's explanation of what happened. Well, when I took over the IPRA organization, basically people just kind of took that at face value, right? And they just kind of accepted that, okay, this is what the officer says, and so they're they didn't do what I call pressure testing here, right? Does what the officer said happen make sense in light of all the other evidence that have been collected, right? The physical evidence, what you're hearing from all the other witnesses. And so when I say that, I don't mean don't believe what the officer said. It's about, okay, this is what the officer said. I get that. Let's make sure that that makes sense in light of all the other evidence that we're seeing in terms of what they're collecting. Okay, so we know that the city bears the burden of proof. So I just want to point this out, right? Is that the city bears the burden of proof in proving this crime. The officer doesn't have to prove that they didn't commit this crime, right? So when we're evaluating cases, we have to have the specific proof, right? We have to meet that burden of proof. And of course, we talked about the standard of proof, right? So what is the standard of proof in the cases that you are evaluating?
Preponderance of the evidence.
Preponderance of the evidence, okay.
It's more likely than not.
More likely than not. More likely than not. Okay, so how does that stack up? What are some of the other kinds of standards of proof that you're aware of? Right, we've already talked about one. Beyond a reasonable doubt. So if you're put them in order, right, along a continuum of there's zero likelihood that this fact is true all the way to the 100% likelihood, where would you put preponderance and where would you put not? A little past the middle, right? Right, exactly, right. And beyond a reasonable doubt, way towards 100, right? And then there are other standards of proof when I teach criminal procedure, then we talk about other standards like reasonable suspicion, right? Probable cause, right? So they're all sort of in positions on this continuum, right? And sometimes it can be difficult sort of understanding conceptually what they mean. But it's something that's important to keep in mind. So you can go through a couple of these. Okay, great, one more. Okay, let's talk about the investigative process, right? So one of the things that I think that you're tasked with doing, based on what my reading of the ordinance and your bylaws, is understanding and evaluating the quality of the underlying investigation that's been put forward, right? So, you know, what does that mean? What are you looking for? You have a sense of what you're looking for in terms of what it means to be of quality. You have a sense of that? Maybe. Yes.
I think is making sure that the opposition don't get back and forth cameras.
Right. So making sure that they're following the rules about turning on their body on cameras, absolutely. The other thought.
They interviewed all possible.
Yes, right. So that they talk to everybody who might have witnessed what happened, right? Have they found those witnesses, right? You know, you can go to the next slide. So when we talk about the quality of the investigative process, there are a few things that I want to point out, right? So we have, you know, an investigation that starts, right? It is based on a complaint, right? Or it can be started based on some incident, like an officer involved shooting. Right? So that's what kicks off the investigation. So then you have a series of steps that happen from there. So you have the preliminary gathering of evidence. So the preliminary portion of the investigation, that's the part that happens right away, right? That is a really critical stage, right? Why? Why is that stage so important?
Because evidence might not be available.
So there's time-sensitive evidence that needs to be collected, right away. What might be some of the examples of those times?
I could see like surveillance camera footage.
That's right. So when you have third-party surveillance footage, sometimes if you don't collect it right away, it can be reported over, right? Some, you know, businesses might report over every 30 days, right? So there's this preliminary evidence gathering at this critical stage. You want to make sure all that time-sensitive evidence is collected, right? And so that includes canvassing for witnesses, canvassing for third-party video, and so you're asking those questions, right? And so then you have, you know, the evidence processing and analysis, and you're happy to take it over, right? And so we want to make sure all the witnesses are found and interviewed. I had a case where there was an officer involved shooting, and it happened at a home, and there was a party going on, you know, party with 25 or 30 people. And they were all on the back deck of this home, and the shooting happened in the backyard, and there was a firearm from the gentleman who was shot. And so when the investigation was done, there was like none of the witnesses, there were no witness interviews, right? And the investigative file, I'm like, well, where are the witnesses? They're like, oh, it was a gun found, the guy had a gun, so we didn't interview, we didn't bother interviewing. Right? Is that a problem?
Yeah.
Okay, what's that a problem?
The gun, it doesn't, we don't have the gun, we saw it.
Right.
No, it's okay.
Exactly. And so just because someone has a firearm does not justify them, right? We don't, right? And so, right, so again, we want to make sure that all the witnesses have been found in this case. And then, okay, so the other part that happens in the preliminary stage is evidence collection at the scene, right? And so you also want to make sure that work is done with quality. So, for example, if there's, so in the states that an officer involved shooting, scene photographs, are they good? Like, can you see them? Well, you know, do you really get a feel for what the scene looked like? Or the involved officers photographed? These kinds of things can be really important. So there was a case that happened in Chicago. It was an officer involved shooting, and a young gentleman who was having a mental health crisis, you know, comes down from some stairs, and the officers went up, and the officer said that he felt threatened by this gentleman by the back of his neck. And so one of the key questions was whether or not the the person was close enough to really be a threat, right? And when the officer fired. And so they did what was called a trajectory analysis, because that was the only way to tell where the officer was standing when firing his weapon, right? And that really helped inform the analysis, because the officer was saying, well, I was here on this, I was on the third step of the stoop, versus standing on the way back to the side, which would vary the trajectory, right? And so those are the kinds of things that can be very helpful in evaluating a case. Okay, so we talked about interviews. Interviews, when you're reading those transcripts, what are you looking for? What are you looking for when you're reading an interview?
Objectivity.
Yes. So is the questioning done in a manner that is objective? Are they using non-leading questions? And so you want to be evaluating the quality of those interviews, or is it being done with impartiality? One of the problems that was going on at the Independent Police Review Authority was when they would interview officers, they had this thing where they had this sort of under agreement that if they asked a tough question, the officer could then stop and say, well, I want to talk to my lawyer, right? And then they'd go off the record. They'd have this conversation they about on the record, right? So what's wrong with that? That's wrong, right? And so again, we're looking for problematic tactics using the interview process, making sure that those are not there. Okay, all right. We can go to the next. Good, thanks. Okay, so let's talk about the idea of resolving factual issues. So when we talk about how these cases, how we make these decisions, it's important to understand that the rules that are in place really guide the factual analysis that you're going to be trying to answer, the questions of fact you're trying to answer. And so what I want to say here is, like, let's say that there's a use of force issue, right? So obviously what the use of force policy says, you're going to be using that to guide your understanding of how the facts fit into that policy, right? You want to understand, you're going to try to understand, was force in fact used at all? What type of force was used? These are the factual findings that will come into the analysis. What circumstances were there in which the force was used? What was the threat? Was the behavior? Was the force necessary and proportional? Let's say it's a different kind of case. Let's say it's a case where the allegation is making a false statement, right? So then we're talking about a different kind of factual analysis. First, you've got to make sure that the officer actually made the statement, right? The statement was in fact false, right? And that the officer knew that it was false, right? So you're going to be, your analysis, the evidence is going to be meant to address those three factual questions. So this is what I mean when I say the rules are going to drive the factual inquiry. Let's say you have a case involving an allegation that the officer failed to honor their duty to intervene in a use of force incident, right? So what do you have to prove there, right? Well, first you have to prove that there was a use of excessive force, right? Then you have to show that the officer saw it, that the officer had an opportunity to intervene and failed to, right? So there's the rule is going to drive the factual questions that you're meant to determine in your analysis. Okay, so then we talk about the outcomes, sustained, exonerated, right? And so you can go ahead and just go operate on the slide. The key thing here is to understand that still we have two pieces of the analysis that come into play here: the factual findings and then the application of the policy, right? And so, and this is how they play out, right? So if you have the first question is, did the alleged conduct even occur, right? And then if it did, then you ask the question of whether or not it was a policy violation, because otherwise we go to it's unfounded, right? And so this is how the factual analysis and the policy analysis sort of drive the outcomes that are found in these kinds of investigations. Okay. So that's the factual analysis and then there's application of policy. So let's talk about factual analysis for a second and weighing of evidence. You can go to the next slide. So finding facts requires that one thing. Finding facts requires weighing of evidence. What do I mean by that? Right? Because we know that we have the standard, the preponderance of the evidence. That means we have to figure out whether there's enough evidence to sort of get us over that, just on the left side of whatever side you're on, of 50% more likely than not, right? It's more likely than not that some fact occurred. Okay, you can go ahead and put the next slide, Jimmy. There's all different kinds of evidence, right? That's going to be coming your way. And some of it may be more valuable than others, right? Some of it may weigh more heavily than others. And so it's important to sort of understand that. And then you have the issue of, and you're go to the next one, direct versus circumstantial evidence, right? What do I mean by that? Right. Yeah, so go ahead. So direct evidence is going to be evidence that directly supports the factual proposition. So let's say you have the allegation is that the person went through a rape, right? And you have a witness who says, "I saw the car move in the light, and the light was red." Right? That's going to be direct evidence, right? And then you also have circumstantial evidence, right? Which is, I didn't see what color the light was, but he was speeding like all that. Right? So what is that? Why is that circumstantial evidence? What proposition does it support? Right, we don't know if the light was green or red, but we know he was speeding through. So does that make a fact more or less likely? Right, that's the question. Right, does it make it more likely that probably the light was red? He's speeding through. Okay, so I want to show a brief video to sort of make this point. You can call it the ground video. Okay, so here's what's going on. This is a case that I think is interesting. I'll tell you what's going on because you can't see all of it in the video. You can only see parts of it. An officer. Outside place. Can you hear me? People online. Oh, people are online. Okay, sorry. Okay, so. What's going on in this situation is you have an officer is driving in her patrol car down an alley, and there's a woman who's driving the opposite direction in the alley, and the cars meet. And then the officer is kind of visually telling her back off. And the woman is saying, "No, my garage is right there. I'm just trying to get to my garage, right? Can you just let me get past?" And so this results in a bit of a melee. The officer gets out of her car. She goes over to the window of the driver's car. They have an argument. And the woman gets really concerned and then backs her car out of the driveway into the street. You'll see this happen. And then the officer then gets in her car and drives around. And you'll see the officer actually through the dash and actually rams her car into the woman's car. But the issue here is that the officer claims that when the woman backed her car up, the officer was dragged along with the car and had been injured. So that was the officer's narrative. All right. So with that as the backdrop, we can show this video.
Will you need the audio for that? Do you want to listen to
No,
it?
it doesn't have audio. It's just that.
It should be going.
Okay,
Oh, it's on. Yeah, it's on.
great.
So it is hard to see, you'll just see a little bit on the melee kind of going on inside. And then you'll see. This is the woman fighting. There's a woman, yes, the woman fighting in the office. Is it? Yeah. And this is the officer running back to her car after she claims she's been dragged. Okay? She claims she's been dragged and now she's back in her car. Oh my goodness. I know, they obnoxious, so. And then she gets another. So now you see the woman is actually, she gets out of the car and she's actually trying to flag down her neighbors and she thinks that the officer is really gonna hurt her, right? And she's really concerned. You can stop that, but that's not, that kind of shows the situation. Okay, so the officer claimed that she had been dragged, right? And at the, after the incident, so after, the officer drives into the car, because she claimed that she was dragged, she called 10-1, which means that officer down. And so of course, the area is flooded, all the police come in, and of course this poor woman is completely, solved and taken out of her car, is afraid and all that. But so the officer claimed that she had been dragged, and so they photographed her. And if you look at the photographs, there was stuff, her face looked like it was bruised, right? And so you have these photographs that say, oh, well, God, she must have been dragged, right? I mean, look at the bruises on her face. Well, she also went to the hospital for medical treatment. And the medical records reported she had dirt on her face. No injuries. What we're seeing on her face is not bruises, it's dirt. Okay. So what is that? What is that circumstantial evidence? Right. Yeah, so the circumstantial evidence, first of all, you see the video, she's running back to her car. Did she look injured in any way? No. Right, and then you have the doctor, the medical record saying there's no injury, but there was a bunch of dirt on her face. So this is a circumstantial evidence of what? Well, did she fall? Right. When the woman backed up, she may have fallen.
Right.
Or she may have staged it, or
Exactly. So you have to sort of weigh all of these things in considering in the context of the officer, right? Okay. All right. So that's just another. Okay. Thank you. You can go to. Let's move on out to testimonial evidence. Okay. So there are a lot of things that we have to think about when we're looking at evidence of what we're hearing from our witnesses, both our lay witnesses and our officer witnesses. And this list of considerations that I'm giving you, this list, I didn't make this up. This is how juries are instructed. But it completely applies in this situation, right? There are things that we want to think about when we're evaluating information provided by a witness. We want to make sure that we understand whether the witness had the opportunity and the ability to see and hear what they claim that they do. Do they have good memory? What's the level of detail provided? What's the manner in which they're providing information? Do they have any interest in the case? Do they have any other source of bias? We want to look at what the witness has in relationship to the other evidence that's gathered and the information from the other witness. And then, so we have to sort of factor all of these things. We can go to the next one. So when thinking about what you're hearing from witnesses, this is kind of how I think about it, right? It's like you have the information that the witnesses tell you. That's kind of like the bubble in the middle.
And then there are other things, the other things are the sort of context in which you're going to try to understand and evaluate that information. So you first want to look at the internal inconsistency of the statement. So the witness gives a statement, and you want to look at, okay, does the statement, is it consistent with what the person is saying throughout that statement, right? Or are things flip-flopping, right? Or are things kind of meandering, right? So there's internal consistency that you want to think about. The next thing is you want to think about, okay, did the witness provide more than one statement, right? And so then you're going to compare the statements and say if they are consistent. Did they keep saying the same thing over again, or did the story change, right? So that's the second thing, is you want to look at the witness statement that's given and in comparison to the other statements. And then you want to look at what the witness tells you in the context of what other people say and what the other physical evidence. And so those are the sort of 4 ways to sort of consider what a witness tells you. Now, it's the thing that we also have to understand is that sometimes, witnesses remember things differently. The 2 witnesses may have different recollections, and that doesn't necessarily mean that one's lying, right? It just means that they have these different perspectives. People often forget things, make mistakes in how they remember things, they see things differently. And so you consider those differences in light of that. It's just common sense, right? And you can also choose to believe portions of a witness statement. You may say, oh, well, in this portion of the statement, I'm not sure I want to credit that, but this portion of the statement, I think makes sense because that's consistent with everything that we've heard. It's consistent with the physical evidence, and the witness had no reason to be biased in providing that piece of the statement, right? And so that's fine. It's fine to sort of do that. Is to consider which portions of witness information you want to credit. And so that's a perfectly fine thing to do. Okay. So then we'll move on. You can skip that one and then go to, right? So let's talk about weighing the evidence. How do you just, yes?
Would an informant be considered a witness?
Right, so yes, so any person who's like giving information is going to be considered a witness, right? And so what might be the considerations that you have when you have an informant as a witness? Yeah, you want to understand, yeah. What is their motivation, right? And so what makes you want to know about that particular informant? Right? What's in it for them, right? For sure. There is informants participate for a lot of reasons. Some of them are paid, right? And so, you want to know, like, the informants getting paid for the information, then are you going to be more concerned about that? Maybe little, right? Or if they're doing it to work on the case, again, you want to make sure that they're just not telling law enforcement what they want to hear because they're going to get a benefit from it. So informants have special, you want to be extra careful when considering information in that context, right, for those reasons. Okay, any other questions? How are we doing for time?
We've got good time.
Okay.
45 minutes.
Great, okay, so let's talk about weighing the evidence. How do you decide the value that any particular piece of evidence is you're going to get, right? How do you decide that? How do you sort of figure it out? Any thoughts? You thought about it at all, or yeah?
I don't know if this is true, but when I'm looking at body camera footage, I weigh that kind of heavily because that seems like a completely objective representation of what happened.
Yeah.
The person is not involved, they don't have they're not involved in the right bit, so they are totally unbiased, and whether or not it was something that they saw directly, as opposed to something that they heard or whatever.
So there's lots of different, but
You have to also consider the true outcome. The dog that doesn't bark. What is the body camera not show? the office is very away.
So that's, I talk about this all the time. Actually, I want to comment on, there's that, but then there's also, I know that we've had this issue on a particular case early on, that just because you're seeing what the camera is picking up does not mean that you're seeing what the officer is seeing, right?
Yeah.
So, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, so body camera footage, obviously has really changed police misconduct investigations as it has gone online, because it has provided a wealth of information. But as you suggest, it's not always the panacea, right? It's not always, sometimes it doesn't provide all the context. Sometimes you don't get the whole of the incident. Sometimes you only get part of the conduct, like a dash cam here, where you see only a little bit of what's going on. So it's not perfect, right? And I think, the case that I point to as like the perfect example of this is the Tyree Nichols incident in Memphis. Has anybody looked at that incident or not? So it was a really horrific use, excessive force incident of beating this gentleman. And the body worn camera footage was not helpful at all because of this, right? And then the whole footage came from the whole cam. So the whole cam video is the only video that actually shows what was going on, right? And so to me, that's a really good case to show that, sometimes body worn cameras are is not going to be misleading, right? Because they're smart enough to, to turn away when their colleagues are beating the crap out of us, right? Okay, so we have this, you just have to understand that some forms of evidence are going to be more helpful and more valuable than others for all the reasons that you mentioned. And then you can go to the next slide. But also we need to know that, sometimes making your factual determination is like putting together the pieces of the puzzle. Sometimes that puzzle comes together neatly and all the pieces fit and you're like, yes, okay, I get it, right? And that's lovely when it happens. Because a lot of times the pieces, you might just have like one piece that doesn't, right? The pieces don't always come together completely nicely. And you have to understand that that's okay, right? You can still get to your preponderance standard, even though you have this extra piece or you have one hole, right? You can still get to that preponderance standard with that. It doesn't have to be perfect because for the reasons I mentioned. Sometimes witnesses, they just don't remember things the same way, so sometimes it's not going to be a perfect puzzle to find. Okay, so let's get to our first case example. Sure. Yeah, sure.
We have a non-biased policing policy. Many of our cases deal with discrimination. And so the IA will ask the officer, did you stop this person because of their race? And they'll say no, and it's done. There's no discrimination. And yet we have studies that show huge amounts of racial discrimination. So how do you prove racial discrimination? We have a case right now. I can't give you the details of it, but I'm 100% convinced it is. Right? But they said no, it wasn't. There's nothing directly, and the author didn't come out and say, yes, I'm racist, and that's why it's happening.
Right.
I don't know of any of our cases where we've sustained racial discrimination, and it absolutely happens every single day. So how do we do that?
Yeah, that's a challenge.
That's when like the said.
Yeah.
It's to me, my opinion. They give more credence to the officers than the complaints of racism. So instead of looking more at evidence, like the commissioner said, everybody else said they were racist. But that's what this witness who the complainant says that doesn't get any as much back away. They're saying just the other. So that seems to have that's very frankly.
Yeah, I think that's really, those cases are hard for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. And so unless you have some specific evidence of racial animus, it's going to be really hard to prove up that allegation, right?
don't know what to tell you, you know, in those cases.
We asked for,
Yeah,
this officer, how many stops has this officer made? How many of them were of the minority? Right, we asked for data, and they're like, nope, it's just this one case, that's all you can look at.
yeah.
And it's just really frustrating because this, one of our current cases is in my gut, and gut isn't one of the evidence.
No, I know, it's not.
But it's 100% harassment or discrimination, and there's zero we can do.
Yeah, it's really hard, even proving, really talk about litigation to prove, racial discrimination, it's still it's a challenge for other reasons that you mentioned, because even there's a lot, even just like using the data, like you suggested, it's really hard to sort of get the data that can actually prove the point, because it really depends on like, how do you compare, like, what's the numerator, what's the denominator with the data? This percent of these stops included individuals who are Black. How does that compare? Maybe it's not fair to do that versus the population person, because you're talking about, well, we're going to see conduct, what we to see, right? What is that population? You know what I'm saying? So that's a very complicated issue. I wish I had better answers.
So the burden of proof's on us.
Yes. Correct.
They can say, I'm not racist, and it's closed. And so we have to be able to prove it, and we don't have the evidence. They won't give us data. They won't give us past history of these officers, and it's just.
Right. Well, that's where it's helpful if the victim or witnesses can identify some portion of the conduct that you can attribute to racial animus, whether it's comments, right? There may be comments that were made. That means that the kind of evidence that's going to be helpful. Other than that, I think those cases are.
Excuse me, for folks listening online, they're having problems hearing the question.
Okay,
So if you.
I will repeat that. Yes.
Or if you speak up so these mics can pick you up where our AV is not as usual, we apologize.
Sure, no worries. I apologize for that.
No.
So I should know.
We appreciate
repeat
it.
questions. Okay. So let's go to our first case example, and there's I'm going to actually do some work. Okay, you're going to work tonight. You're going to work for your feed. So this example is a case that I found pretty crazy and interesting. Okay, so I'm going to try to describe what happened here, and factual summaries is the first page in your folder here. I'm going to go over here and describe. Okay, so here's what happened in this case. There were two sets of two officers, each in an SUV. They responded to a burglary, right, in a neighborhood. And they go and they realize, okay, there's nothing happening here, right? And so they're fine. They leave the call. And as they're leaving the call, they're driving through this alley here. Okay. And they see a young Black gentleman who turns and looks at the car and then takes off. Okay. And so there's a chase, right? So the car follows the young man around this corner, up, and then turns. And then the young man then turns and starts running. This is an empty, vacant lot here. Okay. And so at this point, one of the officers gets out of the car and starts the chase. And so they're chasing the young man all the way through. They go back across the alley. And then they're chasing him through the backyards. These are residences, right? There are 4 residences. So these are the backyards. Now, between the backyards are a series of fences, okay? And so this young man is now hurdling the fences, and the officer is giving chase, okay? When they first see him, they call in that they see a young man holding his son. They don't say that they see a gun. They just say that he's holding his son. Okay? And so the chase ultimately ends up with the officer here. The young man is here. He's shot. It's a shooting. The officer fires a single shot and against the gentleman here, and it goes directly into the back of his head. Okay? And so
And so the officer, the officer's narrative is that they saw him with a gun here, right? And then that's why they followed him, right? There was a gun recovered here. Okay, so he was unarmed, right? He was unarmed during this chase. And so the officer's narrative is he thought he had a gun, he was chasing him, and he thought that he was going to shoot him, and that's why he fired the shot. Okay, now, what you guys have in your packets, oh, the other thing I forgot to mention is, so you have the officer's narrative, right? He's the only one who saw the shooting. None of the other officers saw the shooting. There was a 911 call. The 911 caller calls 911 and makes a statement and says, I think the officers just shot someone, just saw someone shoot a person in the back. And the actual words, the 911 call is in your folder there, right? Okay, so we have, we have this 911 call, and they trace the number, the investigators trace the number of the 911 call, they interview that person, and she says, oh, I didn't see anything, right? I handed my phone to somebody else, they gave the 911 call, right? And so the witness makes a series of statements where she first lies and says she didn't see anything, she doesn't want to get involved. And then finally, in the third interview, she passes out and says, yes, I was there, I saw the whole thing. And he looked like, this gentleman looked like he was going to get away with the others. He was gaining on the officer, right? All right, so this is the scenario. Now, here's what I want you to do. Turn to your attention to go in pairs. Pair with the person next to you. And what we're going to do is we're going to read the witness statements, the officers, and this 911 caller. And then we want to talk about how you resolve the witness statements here. So I'll give you 5 minutes to do that.
Okay, great, cool. All right, so let's, Janae, you need to go to the next. Let's say that, let's evaluate this incident in the context of the SVPD user board policy, right? Which I've given you in your books. If you want to read the whole thing, but I tried to summarize it here, right? Right, so there's these two pieces, right? The officer is justified using deadly force to be reasonably believes the first represents an imminent threat, right? So that's one, right? But the officer can also use it to apprehend a fleeing person for a felony that threatened or resulted in death or serious bodily injury. Does that apply? No. No. So that second piece of that second leg of the use of force policy doesn't apply. So we're focused on the first one, right? So our factual question is: did this gentleman represent an imminent threat to the officer? Right. That's really the question we're trying to answer here. Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so let's try to see how we can figure out the answer to that question. You can stick through three slides. Wait, one more. The suspect, okay, so now we have these written statements, right? You can go one more. One more after that. Okay, great. All right, let's talk about the 911 call. Okay. What do we think about the information that's been provided? How do we compare to make these series of statements, right? I mean, clearly she was untruthful, right? But do we credit? How do we evaluate what she's telling us? Yes. Yeah. What she have to gain from her? Oh, asking what did she have to gain from the making the first statement? And then I think the third statement, keep that in mind. Yeah. The other thoughts? What about just looking to the recording of the So let's talk about that. So we start with a 911, right? So how do we feel about that? How do we weigh that? What kind of value do we give to that? And why?
Can we give it a little more because of its immediacy? Because of its immediacy, like this is what's happened, right?
So there's this idea that the 911 call is being done contemporaneously with the events as they're being heard. And so we're going to give that a little bit more value, right? She's calling right away. And she's saying, this is what I'm seeing in this moment, right? And if anybody has studied evidence like I did as a lawyer, that's why they have that thing called the excited utterance, right? Exception for hearsay, right? It's because that's more credible because the person's saying it as they're experiencing it, right? So we start off with a 911 call, and she says, I think that they just shot someone in the back, right? Because we start, okay, so we have that. So what about the rest of the statement stuff? Like, how do we feel about the rest of what the witness provided? Yeah.
Where you're going for the officer doing the shot in front. But if they were in the way, which is the key because they got shot back there. Then the witness is going to
So the witness, what the witness is saying that she believes that the person was shot in the back is consistent with the physical evidence, right? With the autopsy, which shows a direct shot to the left of him, right? So that's corroboration. So that's going to be helpful, right? We still have the fact that she initially lied. How do we feel about that?
I feel like she was there, of that happening. So she's like, okay, I want no part of it. That's that.
Anybody, does everybody, how do we feel about it?
This phone officer, she's someone about that, so they did, and she's gonna tell the officer, tell all this officer that it's not in prison, it's not arrested, that she just saw this officer shoot in the back of the head. How do you say about just looking at it as a point of view, like, in the sense of how I react to that?
Sure, so we have this witness who was initially untruthful about the fact that she made the 911 call and the fact that she saw the incident or not. She said first, she said she didn't see it, she didn't see anything, right? But we understand why she made those statements. The reasons that she's giving for why she made those false statements, we find credible. Right, and so this is what I mean by we say, sometimes you can say, okay, I'm not gonna credit this part of what the witness says, but I'm gonna credit this part because it's corroborated, right? And I understand why this part of the statement is false, right? And so this, yes.
Fearful of your life, but how are you fearful of your life versus running away?
Exactly. All right. Now let's talk about the officer's statements. Okay, so there's a series of statements that the officer makes. Right. What do we think about those? Okay, the story changes a little bit. Yeah. Say more.
Within one section, you mentioned that he said stop, police drop the gun. But in other instances, he's like, well, I kind of really didn't see it. And that's the only statement when he comes out that he mentioned that line. I think that's something I would not forget as an officer. Like, I say stop, drop the gun. Yeah, so that was.
Right, so go ahead.
I have a question, like, you mentioned it earlier about, sorry, I'm not going to tell you. I don't want to have to. Okay, about how trauma plays into what people remember and forget, and how that influences what officers will include. And so how do you, like in your research, how do you use that thought process and also taking into consideration the trauma that you want?
So when you're talking about trauma, you're talking about witnesses.
No,
Or the officers themselves, yes. So there's that's an important consideration. Officers suffer trauma too, right? And so officers, in the initial aftermath of the shooting, maybe they are experiencing trauma, right? So you have to consider it. That's definitely an important conversation for doing a consideration. Yeah.
What about measuring the words of what the officer says and the fact that the gun was found?
Okay, let's talk about that. I think that's a really interesting point about this case. So there was a gun, right? And so the gun was found along the route, the flight path, right? Right. And so the question is, so the officer says, I believe he was armed, right? And he lost sight of him, so he never saw him toss it, right? So do we think it was reasonable for the officer to have believed he was armed? What do you think?
No,
Why not?
he never saw it.
He never saw the gun.
No, he mentions like at one section, he believed he had a gun, he believed him put his waistband, but he never mentioned about having a gun. And then there was a case where he mentioned that he saw him turn around about to like pull out the gun. But then there was in another statement, he mentioned that he fired almost instantaneously at the guy was turning around. But all of it is inconsistent because he got stopped back at that.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
And just thinking recently as a person that is, if this is a 911 call, getting away, why would you slow down to turn around to pay attention to an officer when you're getting away? So that is not consistent with just as another human being in a situation. You wouldn't do that.
Right. So did you have a question?
Yeah, so this is comment.
Mm-hmm.
The victim, this case, was described as leading principal.
Yes.
The left sentence and the witness indicated that he was using two hands to reach the fence.
Yes.
Okay, so he reached the fence with two hands. And then, as he was shot in the back of the head, it would mean that he was at a height that would require him to be within sight of an officer. If he was in the other side of the fence or below, he would not have been able to be seen. So the different trajectory of the bullet would indicate that Earthclaw was not facing the officer because the officer claimed that he faced him and he did not face him because he was shot in the back of the head. The officer was saying, well, he may have spun quickly.
Yeah.
That was the officer's response. Right. But it's inconsistent with someone running, leaping, grabbing fences, leaping over fences with their back to the officer and moving away.
Yeah, so I think that those are really good points. I think that there's a couple of things going on here, right? So it's first, as you described, the witness actually says she saw him go up, over the fence and then never come back up again. So it was if he was shot when he was in the air. So the officers claim that they saw the gun, when he was running, right? And they didn't report it. Or they didn't call that into instead. They said he was holding his side, right? But it is possible that they saw that in the gun, right? That is possible. So I would say that would be something that I wouldn't feel like I would say yes or no that they didn't see him with a gun, right? But clearly he didn't have a gun when he was running through the yard, right? We know that he's using his hands to go over the fence. He has injury on his hands consistently with climbing the fences, right? Because another question becomes, if you're not armed, are you going to turn around and make a gesture as if you are? How likely is it that you, when you're trying to escape, are going to turn and make a furtive gesture as if you're going to use a firearm and you don't have one, right? I think that's a question. What do you think about that?
It's a very unlikely.
And so how does that play into our standard of proof? All right, so again, the fact that we're finding is that it's more likely than not that he did not make the furtive gesture as the officer has described, right, to suggest he was in, right? Yes.
Did you just finish one color? Did you finish this? Honestly? Are they the same from that one color as they are seeing the south?
So there's a statement from there are three statements from the 911 caller taken at various lengths after the incident. And so in the last statement, she gives the most robust information about what she saw, which was that he was gaining on the officer. There was 2 yards, and I don't mean like yards, I mean like 2 backyards between the officer, at least 2, maybe 3, between the officer and the gentleman, because he was gaining on the officer. And then the witness says, if he would have gotten away if he hadn't been shot. That's what she says, right? So, yeah.
I just kind of have a question on something that stood out to me.
Mm-hmm.
Very first bullet point, they responded to a burglary call, and they determined that there was no crime being committed. Like, why take if there was no crime?
Yes, I love this question. Yeah. So the question is, they go out on this burglary call and they realize that there's no crime that had been committed. They see this young man take off running and they chase him. Why? What was the justification for the chase? It was fun, right? And so, this is why, I don't know, does SPD have a foot pursuit policy? They do. Yeah, so I'm actually doing some research right now to hopefully demonstrate why every law enforcement agency should have a foot pursuit policy that says Mere flight is to justify the things. We see this happening in so many cases, right? But yeah, that's definitely an issue.
Okay, right, because that would not be their response. It's like, he was running for a reason. That would be the police officer.
Right.
You don't run unless you got a reason to run. You see the cops, I'm not justifying it, I'm saying that would be their logic. Right?
Yes, and I think that is, but the thing is, legally, that's not enough to stop the person, right? And that's not reasonable suspicion to do a Terry stop. So if you can't legally stop the person while you're chasing, right? So that's the issue, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's all the time. That's my issue.
Maybe, that's probably what their explanation is.
So they says they start with 2 minutes of
So the issue of do they see the gun or not? I mean, I think that's an open question, right? That's part of the challenge, right?
There's just another one, because she mentioned it.
Yeah.
They say to each other, hey, I'm claiming I saw a firearm, but when they call in the pursuit, no one said firearm. They say holding waistband. So that tells me they were not sure. Because if you're sure, you would say that it was pursuit.
You would think that they would have said that if they'd seen a gun, they would say, I'm chasing a person. You would think it's false.
So I'm always comfortable with this fine. I said, office change, probably of this year. Yellow and red jacket on the side, there was no mention of a firearm in the scene of the camera.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just even going beyond that, when about, I would even be weary of the firearm itself. There was another officer that found it, that was not even part of it. So I would want to go on to the evidence of it. This gun even have anything to do with it.
Okay, let's talk about that. And all this, okay, so this is great. So the comment is, yeah, what do we know about this gun that was found? Right, it's found, they have no idea, like, it's not connected to him in any way, right? And so they find this gun. So the other thing is, like, the other problem with the way this played out, that I'll point out, they actually showed the shooting officer the firearm. And we're going to be on the scene, which was a huge mistake because then he was like, oh yeah, that's the gun I saw him with, right? Now, they find this gun. Okay, so now again, let's talk about the likelihood here. How likely is it that you would find a random gun along a flight path of a person, right? If it wasn't a gun that he tossed. How likely is it that there was just a random gun like in somebody's
Right in the middle,
Yeah, right?
Does it depend on the neighborhood?
Well, maybe, go ahead.
I don't know.
Sure.
The side. Male and red jacket pulled us aside. The 10 code was developed. And when you say 10-4 or 10-20, because microphone click sometimes interferes with the first word of transmission. And so 10 is just a throwaway word. Well, the last word of transmission might also be interrupted. I'm actually just a police news representative.
Sure, yay.
Male in red jacket pulled inside arm. But the arm part, side arm part. He left noise in my ear.
That's possible. He didn't say that. Right? He didn't say that. They didn't say, well, here's what I actually said. I actually did report there was a gun that I got cut off. The officer didn't say that. The officers acknowledged that they didn't call it in as having a firearm in this situation. Right? But that what you're describing could happen for sure. You know,
I that. Male in red jacket pulled inside.
Holding his side. Well, yeah. So what the officer said that they called him was that he was holding his side. And part of that is that, there had been some training back when this happened in this police department that, often they were trained to be concerned about people holding their side because it was indicative of them having a firearm. And then it was like code word for a firearm, right? Holding side. Yes.
This
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is possibly done in the last 2 years.
What do you think?
Two boys here in Ritter.
Yes. Okay.
And the first thing they do when they gonna run is pull the pants up.
Yes.
Okay?
That was definitely an issue in this case. He was definitely right. I was definitely, he was wearing the baggy pants, you know. With the gentlemen. Okay, let's move on. I wanted to I think we can do a little bit of the second case and I'll try to be real succinct about covering it. Let's just keep going. And let's do,
Oops, sorry.
What was the actual outcome?
So the outcome of that case is that the oversight agency found the shooting outside of policy. And the adjudicatory law board, there was a split. Yeah, so the officer was not. So, I won't say anymore. Okay, let's see if we can show, the videos here, because I think these are quick. Okay, let me explain what's going on here. People,
This is the first.
I'll just describe. Okay. So in this case, and we'll try to do this real quick. Really interesting case. Try to something like that. Okay, so reports of stolen car, a Jaguar, in an area. Police are looking for it. The load check goes off. And so there's two kids, I think they were young, in this Jaguar driving in a residential area coming down the street. Okay, so this is the street. They're driving the Jaguar this way, right? And so you have two police SUVs going the opposite direction on the street. The same street, Jaguar and Virgin, two SUVs. The first one says, okay, I'm going to try to stop this Jaguar. I'm going to just park my car in the middle of the street. And the street is, there are parked cars on both sides, right? So the SUV parks so that the Jaguar can't get by, right? Okay. So then there's a second SUV that's back by a couple of blocks, coming behind the first one, right? Traveling down the street. So the Jaguar comes up the street. There's the SUV in the way. It gets by. It goes around between the parked car and the SUV and continues to travel down the street. The two officers in that first SUV get out and they start shooting. Shooting. Okay, right? They're firing their weapons. Now you have the second SUV behind coming, right? And what do they experience?
They're being shot at.
Bullets whizzing by. Okay? So this SUV then crashes, because the Jaguar is now past the first. So the Jaguar then crashes into the second SUV. The driver of the Jaguar gets out and now starts running through the backyards of the residential neighborhood. And one of the officers from the second SUV gets chased and ends up shooting the person, the driver, right? So we're going to see a couple of the dash cam videos. You'll see the officer getting out and shooting. And then what I want you to pay attention to is you don't see the actual shooting from the driver because it happens in the backyard. You can't see it, but you can hear the cadence of the shots on the body camera video calls. So listen for that. I think that's good. No, the second.
Okay.
Did revive camera?
Okay.
It's a stolen car. It's not like anyone's life.
Okay, so,
I mean, it's cool for these folks.
so we all know that shooting at or into a moving vehicle is a crime. Right, so that's pretty much every law enforcement agency at this point has that, right? It's a really bad idea. You're not gonna, first of all, when you actually shoot the driver, then you have a car that's moving uncontrolled, right? And something that can happen. And then if you shoot the engine, let's see, you shoot the engine trying to stop the car, how? That's not happen, right? Okay. So that issue is not even under discussion, right? Because, right, that was wrong, and yes, they were wrong. Right, we're doing that. Because, I don't think so, okay? And if you want to, we talk about more of that in a minute. But the other thing, I don't know, did you notice what other thing that was problematic about the officers who fired when at the Jaguar? They were firing at each other. Right, the other officers like, when you look at the guy, and you're like, oh my God, there's a spark. So yes, that was a problem. Go ahead.
Special operations unit there, because I remember watching this video, they still tuning into Chicago. Okay, yeah, so I did see the other video too, yeah. Wasn't there a special operations unit at that time? Well, that feeling was trying, they did like safety and
There might have been, I don't remember the details of that. That's entirely possible.
Yeah.
So what I want to focus on for our conversation right now is the justification for shooting the officer who gave chase, right? And then shot the young man, right? And did you hear the cadence of the 5 shot? Yes. Okay. So again, using the SCP supports policy, right? Is there an imminent, the question is there an imminent threat? Is this person an imminent threat, right? He's not armed, right? There's no firearm covered. But the question is, was it reasonable for the officer to assume that he was armed and dangerous? Or that's a threat? Because that's what the policy says, right? Was it a reasonable belief? The cadence is the issue because it's like, are you a threat now? Shot. Are you a threat now? Shot. Are you a threat now? Shot, as opposed to boom, 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 which is how we usually hear.
So that's why I wanted you to pay attention to the cadence, right? Because the cadence is not indicative of a threat moment. Like, oh my God, he turned and he's facing me now, and I think he's out of gun, and I'm going to go boom, 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 right? It's boom, 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 right? Okay, so we're not convinced that there was an imminent threat, right? Go ahead.
But that says that the applicant felony.
Okay.
So
Right, so that's, so
that not only did are stolen, but it also ran into another hotspot. Right, so I think that is within.
yes, exactly. So then we have to move to the second part of the
Was
policy.
it worth deadly force? Because was it deadly? So
Yeah, so it's deadly force. So then we move to the second question of the policy, is was the officer reasonable in his belief that the person was fleeing and had committed a violent felony? Yes, the officer thinks that he can be shot at, right? Because he's got bullets whizzing by him, right? Yeah, so if you put up the policy of 3 pieces, I want to just go to that. I think it's go forward. One more. Next one. Yeah. Here. So right. So if we go to the policy, you're asking, was it probable cause to believe that the suspect had committed a felony involving the infliction or threatened infliction of damage to his bodily injury? Yes, because
the officer believed that he had been shot at by this gentleman, right? Because he had good, but what was he like? The officer's not thinking that my compatriots are my, right? Second, did the officer really believe that the suspect is armed with a deadly weapon? I'm being shot at, right? I've got bullets whizzing by my head. Did the officer believe the suspect had escaped would pose an imminent threat to the officer? Well, this Jaguar just ran into my car and this armed person just took off, right? And so this is a part of the policy that they have covered the officer, right?
Yeah, but these officers are great. They can communicate. And presumably they know, are you shooting? Well, first the officer is telling he's shooting, and the second officer hears that the first officer is shooting. That might be a presumption that the officer, the second officer, is going to the shot. So the police officer is not going to.
So in this situation, they did not understand that. That was clear on the interviews with the officers. But if you look at the video, I mean, it all happened pretty quickly, right? So the officers do their firing at the Jaguar, and then the chase it all happens within 20 seconds. Right? They're not communicating the way that you suggest, unfortunately. Right? So the shooting officer had no idea that the other officers had fired. What I didn't show you is a portion of the video where the shooting officer goes up to the gentleman who's now being handcuffed, and actually kicks him and says, "Why did you shoot him?" Right, so he clearly was mistaken in this video.
If you take one more question, we're gonna have to start to wrap it up.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah.
If given the area of the from there, should be shot together, they all the shots be fired everywhere. And they were taking an idea of the risk that we.
Yeah, so that's another issue with the way that the officers discharge their weapons, right? And so we talk about situational awareness, right? When it comes to discharging a firearm, and were they thoughtful enough about where their shots were going? Now that's another problem for the officers who discharge their weapons here. And I want to make sure that I leave time for questions. And so, anything else?
Well, I mean, it says, it also says that we try to.
Oh, yes, right. They didn't, in terms of, when the Jaguar came by the front, yeah, that's another problem. Maybe they should have gotten, they should, instead of firing, they should have just said, okay. Right, yes, that's what most law enforcement policies say around.
Really quickly, I have to ask if you have any public comment.
Sure.
Around that.
Yes, no.
Right. Now, as we wrap it up, if there are any final questions.
So the two officers that fired at the Jaguar were definitely fired, and the third officer was not. It was held that because of that occasion for his use of force, there was nothing that they could do. It was reasonable. Okay, so this, you guys, yes.
It's not about this, it's about the evidence question.
Yeah.
I haven't been on this board long, but I think I've heard that not all the time evidence isn't submitted here all the time, like not all that. So when you, I'd like to know on that position for how would you, have you given certain aspects, like certain types of evidence are submitted for others, and then others, like how does that affect your top line?
Yeah, so it's really important to try to get all the evidence to the extent that you can. And what I found is that some entities are reluctant to use the powers that they have to do it. In other words, you guys have subpoena power. Use it, right? And if you feel like you're not getting all the evidence, then
We will, yeah.
not yet. Okay, when you get it,
When we get our bill permit.
yeah, so when you get it, that's an important thing. So access to all the evidence is really critical. It's really hard to evaluate an incident when you don't have complete information, right? And then so it's really important to try to get all the evidence that's available. And so in Chicago, the oversight agency has direct access to all the police records that they're part of the agencies that has that. All right, so the reason why I wanted to share that case with you is that issue. The idea of you have the policy, but you have to be careful, right? You have to look through the policy and really make sure that the policy is what's going to drive whether or not you can hold someone accountable, right? And in this case, even though this was like a horrific thing, the officer was reasonable in his belief that he was being shot at, right? That this person was violent, right? And that's kind of why I wanted to share that example. This has been my pleasure working with you guys. If there's any questions you have, feel free to email me anytime. My email address is available on the law school website. And good luck with everything. I think, thank you for what you do. You guys are amazing. And I'm so delighted and honored to have the opportunity.
And we were honored to have you, and we could go on all night. So, and I wish we could, but we don't have that luxury. So thank you for your time, Darlene. Would you like to take time of words? Thank you so much. I'm glad it worked out. We get to be here. I was very looking forward to this meeting. And I have Karen's contact information. So anything you want, send it right away. Thank you. Okay. All right, we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we will come back and we will hear from Mr. Bennett. 5 minutes. Yeah, there's food in.
I'm going to turn it over to our general outside counsel, Mr. Bennett, and he's going to talk about commissioners and outreach. Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. I have the duty of trying to follow Dr. Barley and keep taking you to the pinnacle and allocution of the law. I'm going to take you right down into the mundane. So please do. Commissioners, I served as your independent. So I was appointed in 2022 by the city council, not to work for you or not to work for the city, but I'm independent counsel to you all. So I hope that with that, when you recognize that everything I tell you is true, I'm not trying to hold on to God. I don't have to answer to anybody. I don't have to answer to you all, nor do I have to answer to the city council, although they hold the purse strings in terms of terminating the contract. So during my tenure with you guys, I've always tried to be straight up, honestly, and forthright, not thinking about who's behind me, etc. So I want to talk to you tonight, and this is really about you all as a commission, because recently there has been a rash of email from various commissioners about things that relate to the commission per se. And I didn't see a lot of the email. A lot of it I didn't see because I had a cycle to me accordingly. And this is why I generated the Brown Act memo to you all. When commissioners start sending out volumes of email, particularly when they copy various commissioners, it's easy to violate the Brown Act and get you all into a quorum situation. So, for example, a commissioner sends an email to 5 commissioners. You don't know how much further that email communication is going to go. And when it reaches the minority is a violation of state law. Okay, so I sent out the email just to remind you all, right? And I want you to remind you and put your remembrance to the fact that everything that you place or send an email is a public record and it deals with the commission. So some of you are still struggling with getting back responses to PRA requests, the public record act requests, because we're getting more and more of them. So just keep in mind, use email all you want. I'm not going to tell you not to use email, but just be mindful of the fact that you may have to produce that email to a public record act request. So please start segregating that email in certain folders so that when the request comes in, it's easy for a minister to respond to it. And I have to help a minister with every public record act request. And it's a true task. Okay, particularly after around the email, but keep that in mind. Some commissioners, and I won't use any names, and you all can talk freely after I finish it, just let me trigger this and then it's all and go. Some commissioners have questioned respect and decorum within you as a body. Okay. Now, it's ironic that we start getting those issues start becoming presented right around the same time that the mayor's office put out a mandate, or really is working on a policy. There's a City of San Diego Code of Conduct for boards and commissions. Apparently, this is a problem with city commission in terms of decorum, in terms of respect, in terms of honoring the chair, the positions of the chair, and commissioners honoring each other. So we've gone back and forth and worked with the mayor's office in making comments relative to this code of conduct, but I just want to introduce it to you because it's going before the city council. And the council, once they adopt it, it will be an overlay for this commission as well as all the city commissions. I just want to show you, or just talk to you briefly about some of the things you said. Under members' conduct with each other in public meetings. First of all, apparently there's a challenge with respecting the public. And receiving the public. So that's one of the issues in the code of conduct, where it says that the commission shall respect the public, etc. Using public comment to be different. Honor the role of the chair and maintain orders. That's an issue. Practice civility and decorum in discussions and debate. That's an issue. Avoid personal comments that offend other members. That's an issue apparently. And demonstrate effective problem solving approaches. All of those are issues. And the policy is really 3 or 4 pages. I don't know the answer the city council has adopted it, but it's going before the council. And I just put it in front of you because some of you believe me that there is a decorum issue along. So I'm not here to talk to any commissioners. You all can talk about that thing yourself. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention. The other thing that has become a challenge among some commissioners, and this is not them funding, it's just to let you know what some of you are saying. And you're not saying it to each other, but we get to see it. And as you know, as an independent counsel, I'm kind of a fulcrum and I see some of it, so I can get it back to you guys in the context of the meeting. In the mindset of some commissioners, there's apparently a question as to whether or not you all represent the community, or you represent the commission, or you represent the police. And here's what I would tell you in terms of the ordinance and what is required of you. You all, as commissioners, have not been appointed to advocate for the police, nor to advocate for the community. You are here to be a bridge between the two and to make sure that accountability takes place. Okay, so in terms of whether or not you are to rally support for the community or rally support for the police, according to the ordinance, and regardless of what you all think, according to the ordinance, you're nice. According to the ordinance, you are, like Dr. Farley said, neutral, objective decision makers seeking to bring accountability to the department. And you know, commissioners, when you look at it, the essence of government, when you sit through all the stuff that goes out there and is being said about elections and who's in charge, or who's the leader, et cetera, the fundamental role of government is public health and safety. Well, that's really what government is. When you boil down everything else government is, it's about public health and safety. And that's the role that you all play. So you all are part of that whole dynamic in terms of public health and safety. And you are that bridge between the department's accountability for public health and safety to the community. But you're not allies for either. Okay, now why do I say that? Because in some cases, where commissioners get that a little bit out of balance, it could affect you from the standpoint of bias, some type of partiality, etc. And we need to avoid that at all costs. Like throw that out there with you to let you know that your primary predicates are here to ensure equal protection under the 14th Amendment, due process, fairness, and neutrality. 4th Amendment, right? 33 years. Dr. Farley just went over it to make sure that that is complied with. In some cases, you're dealing with the 8th Amendment, criminal unusual punishment. Some cases, you're dealing with the 5th Amendment, privilege against self-incrimination. But these are your basic mandates. Okay. There have been questions about your bio, okay, and changing your bio for various reasons. Here's what I'll tell you. Your bylaws have inherent mechanisms for how they are to be changed, but you all have not implemented those mechanisms. Okay, so there is no process to change the bylaw. And then people said, hey, we need to change the bylaw. There is no process to change it. At this point, constitution has not gone through the predicate of what you need to do to change the bylaw. Here's what you all can do. You can scrap the bylaws and start all over again. But if you do that, you have lost order, you lost decorum, and you will lose time. There is no, the process, the changing the bylaws is a rules committee, which you don't have. Your bylaws require you to have standing committees, which you all have not established and which you need to do. Part of the outreach presentation that I'm here to discuss, part of your outreach is having not the ad hoc committees. You can meet offline, you can meet through Zoom, you can meet in a restaurant when you're an ad hoc committee. When you are a standing committee, that's a Brown Act notice meeting. That's a Brown Act notice meeting. You all in your bylaws have a requirement that you have an outreach meetings. Some commissioners have a challenge with that if this commission is not actively engaged in nothing else. If the community doesn't know what you're doing. Okay. If that's the case, you all need to form the standing committee, the outreach committee, and work on it that way. I mean, that's a good way to do it. It's consistent with the bylaws. It just hasn't been done. We're supposed to have an executive committee. And I told the cabinet, I have to tell you all, the cabinet works way too hard. I told them, I talked to them about it. They keep doing things to me. They can't fire me. So I can just tell them what I think. They work way too hard. There's way too many. It's ridiculous. I saw this particular kid, I told him, I think email around the clock. And sometimes I'm dumb enough for the weekend to check it. Okay? And I ain't gonna do it. I'm like, what are these people doing? Working constantly. They gotta stop. And I told them directly, I'm not telling you anything I have told them. It's too much. Okay, it's too much. And so the way to get around some of this is by forming some of these standing committees, which are notice meetings. Now, here's what that means for you all. If you're on a standing committee, all right, and it's a Brown Act committee, there's no more Zoom. There's no more telephone. There's no more, whatever. You have a notice meeting whenever you meet. You're there. The public is invited. You can have outreach. You can get out. You can receive comments. If you want to attend, or a commissioner wants to attend and see what's going on, they can do that. But these standing committees and these bylaws need to be implemented. Right now, there's no process for changing the bylaws unless you all just decide, we don't like the bylaws, we want to scrap them and start all over. Not recommended, wait till your time, but it's on you all. Commissioners, all right, there's another challenge and there's been another issue about commissioner speech. Who can I talk to? Can I have my own press conference? Can I represent myself? Can I set up my own office hours? Here's what I have told the cabinet, and this is what I'll tell you. Yes, you have a freedom to speak. If you want to go out and you want to talk yourself, and you want to represent yourself as an individual commissioner, and you want to hold hours, or you want to go out and you want to go on television, or you want to do a press conference, there's nothing stops you. There's nothing here that can tell you, or nobody here that can tell you you can't do it. Even in the city's code of conduct, it says that commissioners who are on business can represent themselves as a commission. But if you really think about that, nobody can tell you, commissioners, what you can say and what you can't say. If you go up and you decide you want to go somewhere and you want to talk, represent yourself as a commissioner and speak, you can do that as an individual. But please, commissioners, note this, please. If you do it, if you go out and say, hey, I'm a commissioner and I'm going to go to some community meeting and I'm going to tell what the commission is doing, stuff like that, you can do it, right? Here's the only thing I would caution you about. If you do so, keep in mind, you do not represent the commission. The commission and what the commission stands and stands for only comes through the chair. That's because you all decided that. That's also what the city code of conduct. The chair speaks on behalf of the commission as a whole. But you certainly can speak on behalf of yourself. You can interview, you can talk to people. If you want to do, an interview, hey, it's on you. You're doing it so as an individual. Here's the challenge. If you misrepresent or you say something wrong, you're subject to be corrected. If they go to either Paul, they go to the chair, they may correct you and you have to deal with that. But the real question, this is not something talking. Okay, please, go ahead and talk if you want to talk. The real issue is what happens in ministry. The one thing you can do, you have a freedom of speech, but you cannot disclose confidential information. You can't disclose key talking to your personnel information. You can't disclose stuff that comes out of closed session. If in the context that you go and speaking as an individual commissioner, you do that, you're out there by yourself. All right, as long as you're in this room, you have an attorney here, you have the deliberative process, you have the cloak of the city as an overlay. Once you get out there and you start talking and you start representing yourself, if you say something wrong, but you disclose some information, there's nobody to protect. And I even asked somebody, just to make sure I knew what I'm talking about, I asked somebody behind the scenes. I said, hey, what happens if a commissioner goes out and represents something that's not true or misspeaks? Don't think, you all, that the police officers association does look at everything that's out there and they say that you don't think they're shy about coming after those people who misspeak or who they believe compromise what they stand for. So I asked somebody behind the scenes, what happens in that case? And they said, you know what? We really don't know. And that's not the person that you want to be. They don't know. They're not necessarily having trouble. So just keep in mind that. But if the commission have a freedom of speech, I just don't want to let anybody think that they're being muzzled. You all do what you want to do. If you do it just like they do it, then we're going to do the commission. There have been questions about translation, how the message of the commission goes out to people who do not speak English. That's the executive officer's job. So you can ask Paul about that. Paul has translations that the city, by policy, by law, the city has to translate what you are doing into several weeks. Okay, that has to be done. And, you know, that's up to Paul. That's not really a commission obligation. That's up to the executive officers to figure that out. Commissioners, some of you have complained about rush meetings. Okay, just like tonight, right? We only have so much time. One of the inherent challenges of you all as a commission is you are too large. Not your fault. It's not your fault. There are 25 people on the commission. And just like when Professor Farley did a beautiful, excellent presentation, everybody couldn't talk. And some of you probably wanted to talk 3 or 4 times, but because of the time constraints, everybody can't talk because you're so large, all right? But the other thing I would say is this, you know, you had a great presentation about your case review. A lot of your meetings are rushed so that you all can get into closed session to do case review. All right. I said this in October. For those of you who were original commissioners back in October when you first got appointed, I said that and I said it, and on my way out the door, we get to the general counsel. They that person won't say it, but I'm going to say it. You have to figure out you have to figure out a better way to do case review so that it doesn't take so much time and it doesn't dominate the meetings. Some of you complained about the fact there's not enough outreach, there's not enough engagement with the community. There's not, because you all spend an hour and a half or hour and 15 minutes on case review and you only need to do 3 or 4 cases. At Taylor, where Mr. Parker is the expert, and this is why I'm saying I know it can be done, if we would go through, when I sit over clerk and I back up, I serve as backup counsel clerk, we'll go through 15 cases in closed session, including 4 or 5 death cases because people died over at our jail. We'll go through 15 cases in an hour and 15 minutes. And they get them done. They go to the board. The board has access to the files. They get to review the data. They get to familiarize themselves with the cases. But there is a clip. There's a time to move through those cases faster. And if you all are never be able to maximize what you're supposed to do, particularly in investigative cases, once you get full authority to do it, you can start moving cases quicker. And this is what rushes your meetings in part, because you got to have an hour and 15 minutes for cases. I asked the chair, I said, you know, this I knew Professor Farley was coming up. I said, look, you all need to remove case review so that you can have some discussion about how you're going to move forward, you know, just as a commission. So I throw that out to you. There's a lot of your rough meetings, but if that case review stays alone, I'm sorry. You know, what can I say? What can I say? The one thing I would close the incident is I will close by saying this. Please make sure that you understand what your power is. Some of you are getting frustrated. I've talked, and I'm just being honest with you. I'm not mentioning anybody. You know, if you're in the room, you know who you are. I have talked to so many commissions about not quitting. People want to quit. People getting desperate. People getting frustrated. I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm talking to you. You know how they call lawyers? All the attorneys in here. You know how they call us counsel? I'm counsel. I'm lawyer and counsel, literally, talking people off the leg. Look, don't do it. I'm serious. Some of you know, you make meetings, I get, and I told more than one commissioner. I don't know, and I don't have all the answers. In some cases, I told some of you all, look, you see it one way, I see it another way. Let's agree, let's still walk together, and we just agree to disagree. Sometimes we just have to agree to disagree. Sometimes we can't agree with everybody, just agree to disagree, and we keep going. But I will tell you, commissioners, please, don't get frustrated, okay? Don't get frustrated. You are a part of the public health and safety process. And even though you might not see a lot of solutions, even if the only thing that you accomplish on the commission during the 2 years, or 1 or 2 year tenure, is that you bring light to some of these policy issues, that's where your power is. See, the thing about it is when I hear commissioners talk about how we're not engaging with the community and we're not involved enough in outreach and stuff, that's true. Some of that's true. I get it. That's true. But you know why? Because a lot of the meetings are spent behind closed doors. The commission says, or the ordinance says that you are supposed to engage with the community. You are supposed to talk to the community. You're supposed to be accountable to the community. But the community doesn't know what to do behind closed doors. And you'll never find out. As long as you're in closed session, you're not engaged with the community. If you all want to engage more with the community, you want greater outreach, you want more accessibility, then you have to make yourself available to the community more often, out in front of the community instead of in closed session. So I would just encourage you all, look, before, and I'm not sure, don't ask me any questions. You all have all the answers. I have no more answers. I just throw all these issues out for your consideration. Commissioner power is limited. Please do not. I saw some of you in the last meeting. It was interesting. I wasn't here. I was just watching on Zoom. I saw commissioner frustration. And I saw commissioners being very, very aggravated. What can we do about this? What can we do about this? What can we do about this? Please, 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 remember your power is limited. All the commission can do is make recommendations. You can't make the police department do what you want. Because you can't make them. You can make recommendations, but we can't, say, no, we demand. You just can't make them because by ordinance and by charter, you are recommending, you can make recommendations. But it's still a really, really critical process in the public health and safety process. And again, just like I said, please don't be discouraged or frustrated because you're all making changes. You're making a difference. Whether you know it or not. The fact that you shine lights on something. In the pre-test meeting, when we had the pre-test meeting, the chief of police came here and acknowledged to you, yes, there's an issue, we need to do something. That's changed. You brought light to that. You brought attention to that. So it's working, not perfect, it's a work in progress, and I know you all have more work to do, okay? So my job tonight was to put the issues on the table. You all now can take it. Everything I discussed is a part of what you can discuss tonight if you choose to do so. You can't take action. Now, you can't take action, so you can't vote on anything. But I put several issues on the table. Just to reiterate, I just go down the line again. Email and public records, the city code of conduct, which is the decorum and respect for one another. The commissioners are not advocates of the community or the police. The bylaws are subordinate. There is no current process to amend the bylaws. Unless you can scratch the bylaws and start all over again. I talked about commissioner speech. You speaking as an individual versus being the commission being represented by the chair. I talked about language translation and making sure we have appropriate outreach. And I talked about rush meetings. So any of those topics that you want to weigh in, those of you commissioners who have sent emails, you know who you are. Those of you commissioners who have had discussions with some of the people I've discussed with, if you want to talk about that, this is your time to do so.
Thank you, outside counsel Bennett. First, we need to see if there's any public comment. No public comment. Okay, I open it up to questions. We have about 10 minutes. Are there any questions? Commissioner Flores.
Right now, we just have time to proposal for
No, if we have time for Commissioner, can we do?
Okay, I'm sorry. No, you commissioners can talk. If you like to see something on the agenda under commissioner comments, commissioners can always offer that. What I told the chair, here's what I told the chair about, just so that everybody knows. any commissioner should be free to offer something and, add something to the agenda if they deem, they think it's something that's in the interest of the commission. But you commissioners, in order for that item to come in, you all need to have a consensus if that's something you want to talk about. So if I'm a commissioner and I have a personal issue, right, and I want to talk about something, I want this on the agenda, and the chair says, okay, is that the consensus of the group, and you want to have the discussion? Everybody's going, no. That item shouldn't go on the agenda, the waste your time, right? So you all, but if you want to add something to the agenda, then you can do that, or you can ask.
Okay, go ahead, but loud so the mic picks up, please.
So for doing presentation, I would like to go to add to the agenda. The second on the whole committee, and it's going to be other committee. And that's one proposal that
Actually, that's coming up, and I'll talk about some of the committees that we're going to be forming soon in my chair report. So that's coming up. Okay, you don't need to, that's already been planned for. Go ahead. Yeah. Anybody else? Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Molman.
So related to your comment about how long our closed sessions are, I would like to put out to all the people that do closed sessions, keep that in mind, because we are all given before every meeting the final camera we can watch. We're given the reports, and so reiterating the whole report in this venue just takes time. So I think it should be incumbent on all of us to be prepared, and then each presenter can say, just refresh your memory, and like, oh, I was going to say in 1 minute, whatever, it's like in charge, say what it is, and then any discussion, vote, okay.
Do we have a consensus? All right, that's not something we're going to vote on, but I think you get the point. Any other, thank you, Commissioner Molman. Any other comments? Commissioner Griffin-Jones.
You need to raise your voice, yeah. Well, I'll try to be loud enough for the mic. I think that it's super important, especially around the conduct and respectability, that people keep in mind bias that they may have when Black women express things. In my professional career, behavior that has been excusable for many, for white men to have, has not been excusable or permitted for me as a Black woman to have. So I'm very curious and interested in the code of conduct, and I also wonder how the rising of the code of conduct happening also has to do with increased participation by historically and systemically excluded people in these spaces. So it's a comment, but I'm very interested in doing that we are a very diverse board, like other boards are becoming more diverse, and the participation is also becoming more diverse and representative of the community. So I'm very interested in, interested in this connection of, and I'll be paying particular sensitive attention to the way in which, the way that Black women, femmes, and other folks, and oppressed folks express themselves, and how that's being as not professional when it is us being our people.
Well said. And I guarantee you as chair, that will never come from me. And I know I can speak for the cabinet because, this is a wonderfully diverse group and everyone's voice is welcome and needed.
So again, the code of conduct is something city's doing. Now look, some of you all know who you are. So please, if I struck a nerve with any of these topics, please say it, because you all are talking about this stuff outside of the meeting. So, I put all this stuff on the table, you guys don't think I made it up, I did. So please.
You know, you have to.
No, you're not.
For me, as someone who's been in commission and other spaces before, I have to say that this is the space that I feel very excited and challenged and very just inspired by everybody in this space. So
Do you feel safe to speak out in this space?
Sometimes.
All right, well, we're gonna get to all the time. No, it's important. Anybody else have any, Commissioner Robbins?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's on the front page of the website, and basically it's also on the agenda. So on the very front page of page 2. It's the purpose of the commission. Page 3. Top of page 3 is the purpose of the commission. And the bottom line is oversight in order to make a safer community for both residents and police. It's balanced. So yes,
So, yeah, so Commissioner, there's a question, there has been a question and a criticism of the commission not being actively engaged in outreach. So from the standpoint of the community not understanding what you all are doing. And commissioners who have their concerns, please speak up now. I mean, because it's there, I mean, just like I said, there's this undercurrent. But so the commission by ordinance has to have outreach. You have to do it, by law. You have to have outreach. And there has been a criticism of this commission not being enough, not engaging enough with the community, or not letting the community in on enough of what you do. You commissioners who have their concerns, you feel free to speak up.
Commissioner Dockstader. I can, and then Rodriguez. I'm sorry.
Okay. It's completely fine. I do want to mention about the workshop, and so I increased the list this little bit. Yes, is that?
Yes, better, thank you.
So I sent an email, and I've been talking Executive Director Parker about like the potential training. I think I brought it up at either our last meeting or the meeting before about like communication with each other, mediation, things like that. And one of the reasons I brought it up was because the council member, when I was appointed, made a specific mention that I was going to need to draw upon my meetings to be on this committee. So I think that there is already a public perception that's needed on this committee. And so I just wonder, I mean, I set my own personal recommendation of this committee, but I think, and I'm not going to bring quorum, but anyone could send a recommendation of it to Mr. Parker, right? It doesn't need to be my recommendation. Any training anyone has taken to take more psychological safety, right? Like Commissioner Griffin just talked about, but I just think that could be a good opportunity.
And the one thing I'm going to address in the chair report is the possible retreat where we can do some of that. So thank you. That's very important. Commissioner Rodriguez and
I kind of forgot. But I will make the comment in general that I think I appreciate everyone's want to get the ball rolling, but we also have to take into account that we are doing a lot, and it takes time. This is a new body, just started. I know it's very frustrating. I get frustrated too, but then I always go back and remind myself it takes time, and we just got a new commissioner. When I came in, I asked the same question, great. But once I started coming in, I'm like, okay, we can't stop the ball rolling just to pay attention to something else. So we have to gradually start.
And it's 2 tracks, and that's what we did when we first started as the original commissioners. We still did case review, but we also did training. So we went 2 separate tracks. So that's, I think, what you're referring to. Now that Paul is here, I have to tell you, he is getting really, focusing on the training, especially for newer commissioners. I applaud him for that, and Mr. Bennett as well. So we are working on that. Again, it's a work in progress. We need to give each other grace. Okay, Commissioner Flores, and then Commissioner Justice, and then we have 2 minutes left, and then Benitez, so I'm gonna go with Commissioner Flores first.
We talked more about like the communication we have with the community. I think it's beneficial for us to consider creating statements for a Spanish-speaking audience as well. I think we're in one of the, we're right the big part of the world, the business part of the world, and any sources that the community needs, all the times are in Spanish because part of the population in the we Spanish, and have statements or experience for that audience as well as the English-speaking audience, and to have an invitation for them to join us. And it's something that they will feel once we have all of our documents in Spanish as well on the website immediately, and we have all of our agenda items, and we have that available for people, as well as demonstrating that they can join and keep Spanish on live with our comments. But they're invited to do so and have transition to the
And I know that Mr. Parker is working on that, and not just Spanish, because there's Tagalog, there's Vietnamese, there's Mandarin, which is the third largest. There's I can't even go into them. I work for Poway, there's 90 languages, and I didn't even know 90 languages existed. But my point is, yes, that is being worked on. It's a work in progress. But I do want to, on one thing that you said as far as a different message in Spanish, what I would like to see, and I know that Mr. Parker is working on it, if there's a statement released in English, it'd be the same in Spanish, not because it needs to be equal. So I think that's important. Okay, thank you. I'm going now to Commissioner Justice, then Benitez, and we need to wrap it up. Again, sorry.
Well, Commissioner, you can mention anything that you all are doing, but you can't, it's easier for me to say what you can't mention. Okay. You can't mention anything that's in closed session. You can't mention anything that you find out about a police officer personnel file or the individual cases that you all discussed or that you all learned. So remember, all you commissioners signed a confidentiality agreement, between the police. You can't disclose any of that information. But in terms of the business of the commission, in terms of what you're working on, in terms of what the commission's interests are, in terms of what the commission represents, etc., that's very good for any of you commissions to talk about. And so, you can't, just like that, you can't speak on behalf of the commission, but you can certainly speak on behalf of yourself. If that makes sense.
And honestly, what Mr. Bennett is saying is so important. And I don't think the way to get to it necessarily is the media, because not everybody watches. It's more community, the outreach that he's speaking about. And that's how you get one-on-one. That's how you get people to do complaints. I'm sorry, Commissioner Benitez, it's all yours.
I just, having served on the bylaws committee, I remember as we were working on the initial bylaws, I was realizing that, we still are building the plane while we're flying it, which is why we're having this conversation now. My question to Dwayne is, the bylaws don't have a specific mechanism for updating or editing. However, in the absence of having that specific mechanism, I don't know that, I'll ask. Are you saying that we have to assume that we cannot update or edit in the absence of starting from scratch? Because that seems, because that's what I heard you say. And so I guess what I think would be helpful, and the cabinet can tell us when or how they want us to do this, is that was an ad hoc committee that was formed, I believe, in yeah, and we could pick it up and take feedback to, from the now a little over a year old commission and make any, necessary tweaks or updates and bring it back.
Yeah. Look, you all have no mechanism for addressing it. So in the absence of having a mechanism, you can do whatever the heck you guys want. I mean, you don't have a mechanism. You say these bylaws have a mechanism for how to change them, but that mechanism doesn't exist. So it just depends on you all. What I'm saying when I say you can scrap and start all over again, you can do whatever you want to do with the bylaws, because right now there is no process. Don't want to say what I told some people. There is no process for changing them, so you all just have to change them. Okay, and until you divide or develop that process, now, if you say, even, you should implement what you said you're going to do in the bylaw. You should create the standing committees. There was a time when you didn't have the staff to do it. I don't know if commissioners who sit on the standing committee really want to have notice meetings or have their convene in public, when they want. But one thing I think these commissioners do, the ad hoc committees that you created are supposed to be temporary. Okay, they're supposed to be temporary. And if they've been going on a year, they're losing the status of being temporary. They're no longer temporary, they're standing. So for example, the training committee, looks like if the committee is going to say, that should be you all need to make that a standing committee. Okay, I'm jumping again. So I'm gonna stop.
Thank you, everyone. I thought that was a really good discussion, and I want to give Mr. Bennett a huge hand. I appreciate your counsel and your honesty and your spirit for this mission. Okay, so we're going to go on to the chair report. All right, the CPP has officially been in existence for 1 year. The original commissioners took the oath of office on August 29, 2023. So congratulations to all of you and the newer commissioners. Now, in that time, the CPP has undertaken the review of 3 police policies. Granted, we're still in it. And we look forward to continuing our mission to make a safer community for residents and police. So just a reminder that our protest policy community hearing is on Saturday, September 24th at 12:30 at the Barrio Logan Library. We will post an agenda and you will get one. So here's a brief look at some of the topics coming up in the next few meetings so you could be thinking about these issues to discuss. Since we talked about the time constraints, we may not discuss that at the next meeting. We'll see how it goes as we move along with the case review. But we will definitely talk about it and see how it goes, see how everyone's feeling. We want people to have time to speak, but as Wayne said, there's a lot of people to speak. So we're trying to balance that. All right, we're also looking at a team building retreat, similar to what Commissioner Dockstader was saying. In order to do that, we tried to have one in January with the original commissioners and the National Conflict Resolution Center. We were going to build, a code of conduct with the commissioners and agreements. However, unfortunately, we did not meet quorum because it was the weekend right after the floods, and a lot of our commissioners were helping the flood victims. Thank you all who were helping. So that didn't happen. We are now looking to schedule that. It may be a Saturday, maybe in early November, because we have some meetings coming up, which I'm going to go over a couple more. So please try to, as soon as we have dates, we will get them out to you. You will be polled. So if you get calls from our fabulous interns, Jorge, and now we have a new intern, Kelsey, you want to just wave? Yay, they're awesome. Or Alina or Janae, please let them know so we can know. If we don't have a quorum, we're not going to do it. If we're close to not having a quorum, we're not going to do it because it's not fair to set up and then someone's sick, which they shouldn't come, and then everyone waits their time. So we're trying to be as respectful of your time as possible. All right, so now we're going to start forming standing committees. Now that we have more staff, and Mr. Parker will talk about that, we have the structure to do the standing committees, to meet in person, to have minutes done by staff, because we're already doing a lot, and the staff is here to support us. So to put out the agendas. At the next couple of meetings, probably the next meeting, I have to do the agenda, so forgive me if it's not the exact next meeting. We're looking at starting with 3 committees. As Mr. Bennett said, changing the training and continuing education committee from ad hoc to permanent. Then adding the community outreach committee because everybody's interested in that and it's important. And also then the rules committee. So at some point, according to the bylaws, everyone has to be on a committee. There are a couple other committees that we're going to slowly go into this because again, we have to get the format, we have to get the agenda, we have to get where are we going to meet? We have to meet in person, we have to get the minutes. So we're going to wade into it, okay? So if anyone doesn't agree with that, please let me know. Everyone seems to be in consensus. Go ahead. the bylaws call for community outreach right now. So if everyone agrees to changing the bylaws. So it needs to, let's start out with what the bylaws are saying, okay? And then out of that is the executive committee, which is the cabinet and then the chairs of those committees, and they'll meet as well. So once we form, as I said, the standing committee, 72-hour notice, and post the minutes and on and on. So that is what has been the holdup. It's so much easier to meet on Zoom. And we can still have ad hoc committees. We can finish the ad hoc committees for the policies that we're looking at. That's okay, because I checked with him. Any questions about that? Yes, ma'am.
Well,
Yes.
well, what you see, they don't have to buy.
No, the rules committee is more for the rules for the CPP. It's an internal. It's a,
I understand.
okay.
But sounds like that this would be.
That's the code of conduct by the city. That's a different issue. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure what the rule is.
It's called a rules committee, and it looks at the rules that oversee this committee. That's one of the committees that will look at changing the bylaws. Do we want to do that? So it has specifics, yeah. All right. Last thing, we are close to hearing from our outside investigator who reviewed the 153 expired cases. We're working out a date for the investigator to present his report. Okay. That's it for me, trying to be as transparent as possible. Anything else? Okay, now I turn it over. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
The protest procedure community hearing is the 14th.
It's a Saturday. It is a Saturday.
I think it's 24th. I could have heard you.
I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting me. It is the 14th. I thought I said the 14th, so okay, everyone said I said the 24th. My apologies. It's the 14th on Saturday. Thank you for correcting me. Okay. Barrio Logan Library. You'll get it. Yes, you'll get the
We
information.
do not
Anything
have a
else?
Saturday meeting on the 21st, if I have that on my calendar.
No, we changed that at a couple meetings ago and voted on the 14th. Anything else? All right, I turn it over to our executive director for his report.
In the interest of time, I'm only going to do one thing. I'll put the rest of the writing and send it out to you folks tomorrow. The main thing we want to talk about right now is Aaron Burgess. Aaron Burgess is our policy manager. He's sitting right over the table. And I'm going to give him 20 seconds. 1 second, Steve. Seconds to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Aaron. Nice to meet you all. I don't know everyone here, but I come from the San Diego County Board of Supervisors of the Public Safety League for Chair Lawson Reamer. Before that, I worked in District 4 doing community engagement. Always done restorative work, trying to find restorative or redemptive approaches to mass incarceration. And so I'm happy to be here.
Okay, you got 10 more seconds. Oh, me. Hi, yes, Sinville, started yesterday as well. He's our senior management analyst. And then otherwise, there are many things I want to put right to you folks tomorrow. We're in the process of updating our IA processes, meeting with risk management. You folks want to pursue data payouts, just trying to give you that data. Success factors for training. I mean, there's just so many things. But the main thing, and it goes back to something that's been said earlier about community outreach, and one of the public commenters also said about getting out into the community. As I've been saying to this commission since I've been here, I'm getting out in the community. Yasmin's keeping me out. Last week I met with 2 community groups. The third canceled because they have previous commitment. I'll be meeting with at least 3 or 4 other community groups the week of September 17th. I continue to ask for it. Commissioners, tell me where to go. I'm there. Community members, tell me where to be. I'll be there. We will continue to focus on that during my term here as the executive director. With that, I'll turn back to the chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. We have one more, and that would be an update on the pretext ad hoc committee, and that would be ad hoc chair Rodriguez.
All right, I'll try to be fast. I'm trying to do this fast So bear with me, okay? Our first street test ad hoc meeting happened on the 20th of August at 5:30. We met through Zoom. In attendance was myself. I was voted in as the chair. Second Vice Chair Case was in attendance, so was Commissioner Bayer and Commissioner Flores. One commissioner who was initially volunteered to be part of the committee has dropped off. And we have some no-shows. So if anybody wants to join, I think that's allowed. Is that correct? Yeah. Send me an email and we'll see if we can get you in. Can someone join?
Yes, it can go up to 7. So as long as it's not 7, I leave it up to Chair Rodriguez.
All right. So first we started with, we have developed an initial very rough draft with an introduction, potential recommendations, conclusion, just to have to start with. And we reviewed it and shared feedback among each other. We shared resources. When we discussed about if SBTV happens to have readily available data on the number of guns, drugs, and contraband retrieved from pretext stops. We discussed the RIPLA 2024 report. We discussed LAPD's pretext policy changes, which changed recently, and its reported results. We also discussed some commissioners' experience and noted observations regarding traffic and pretext stop during ride-along experiences. We discussed the association of pretext stops and call gang database, discussed the repercussions of call gang database, suggested adding insights for the call gang program to the recommendations. We discussed the possibility of bringing in external speakers to aid in developing recommendations. We plan on bringing in Andrea Guerrero, Executive Director of Canadian Alliance San Diego, and Chair of the RIPLA Board. She has agreed to meet with us in October 9th, and we discussed the importance of not rushing but emphasizing the time sensitivity. We all agree that this policy recommendation has to be urgent yet deliberate. We'll discuss ideal timelines our next meeting. And we suggested being persuasive and emphasizing that we, the CPP and SVPD, are on the same team in our communications and recommendations. For action items, we have Commissioner Flores, who's going to be responsible for updating and editing the current rough draft between now and next meeting based on today's the meeting discussion. Second Vice Chair will schedule recording meetings and get contact info from Andrea Guerrero. And all commissioners will come prepared with a list of ideal recommendations based on their research to compare, discuss, and narrow down. Our upcoming deadline, September 9th, which is the rough draft edit. We gave ourselves 2 days to review, and our next scheduled meeting is September 11, 2022 at 5:30. And that concludes my report.
Okay, so now we go, are there any commissioner comments? We have a few minutes. Okay, don't everyone raise your hands at once. Thank you. I think it was a really healthy discussion. Feel free to contact us or call or me if there are any concerns, questions, comments. It's not breaking the quorum if you contact both of us. And we want to hear from you. We only get better when we're a team. So I adjourn the meeting at 7:28. Thank you.